by people in their cars makes them specifically a smart fan. I just can't believe it's like
Okay. Yeah, I can totally do that. I'm never more in your life. It's just family stuff. I'm good. How are you? I'm good. Thanks for that.
oh, good.
You're gonna sit over here. I don't know where you want to sit. We're first time. What's that? Like that, or like that better. Oh, I have to get more data. Let's sit in a row. Yeah, so I get my soccer and just say, by the way, this is going on, and then I sent them a note, so either a few minutes or
I think I heard.
Thank you so much.
Unity is our power. So like a fist come together. That's right.
Well, that's right. So Gary gets to be.
So anyhow, having worked my whole life in government, large government, it's always really interesting business happens. Because I can see how much of a risk it is.
Yes, then you will know.
I mean, all risks are.
Yes,
different.
I get that. Thank you. I thought it did.
But I looked at the location.
That's good.
You know, I'm sure that you were looking to say, flood insurance. You know, imagine locations, period.
Well, what background story?
No, I'm sure that in the building itself.
I'm good. Okay. I'll double check. Friday night. Okay. Okay. I'll double check. I'll make sure it happens.
In a quiet place.
Oh, yeah, okay. I don't think we're gonna do this.
She watches me. She sits like this close to me.
Yeah, I just wanted to have a little.
I wish I had time.
Well, yeah. By the time you're not understanding what you're saying, she gets all the stuff, you know?
I have.
Hold on, I need to turn it back on.
We just planted a bunch of flowers in everywhere.
You know, you weren't even there the other night. I was disappointed.
Where? I was at the Kiwanis thing. Oh, with that, yeah, no.
All set?
I think we're ready.
Are we?
I'll tell you
I think,
that.
I hit start, so I think we're on.
All right. We'll call the Manitou Springs City Council work session for July 23rd to order.
This is a super nice guy.
Roll call,
He's
Councilman
Canadian,
Smith.
so they're all.
Councilman Todd. Councilman Todd.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Fortune.
Present.
Mayor Jerez present. Councilwoman Elder. Here. Councilwoman Wolver. Here. Councilman Roy. Here. Presentations, I don't know if we have any presentations. Well, we probably have presentations, but they're under discussions. So we'll call item D1, discussion concerning increase.
We do have a speaker request.
I'm sorry, we have a speaker request?
I don't think that's on the agenda, but I did receive that.
Oh, Rob Moreland, we have you on the agenda. You're good.
Okay, we just saw the sign and
No, you're good.
we don't cover it.
You're a formal agenda item, thank you.
Yeah.
Alright, so for those folks on the match program, you wanna come on up, join us? I think Leah was gonna help
I'm gonna try to.
facilitate this conversation.
I'm double checking to make sure we're screening. You have to talk into the thing?
You do, and if you can make sure they're on, would be a good start. Is it on?
Yep.
Okay.
Got it?
So let's do some quick introductions.
Natalie Johnson, 22 Taos Place.
Farley McDonough, 621 Columbia Road, Colorado Springs.
And Matt Kavanaugh, 17 Washington Avenue, Manitou Springs, Colorado.
Well, thank you for joining us. It's a bit of an unstructured conversation, but Leah, I think, is going to help us put a little bit of structure to it, and hopefully help us become productive, respectful, candid,
Where's all our
helpful. discussion. Our rules are in the back of that board.
Okay, I'll turn them around. Yeah, so I know that we attempted to have these discussions more than once. And so what I thought would be good for a starting place is maybe to have us kind of talk about what the objectives are of the discussion tonight. Maybe best case, maybe meet minimum standards, whatever it is that we're talking about, because I think it's important for council and for the committee to have a good understanding of where there's overlap. Frankly, from a person who's looking from the outside into the conversation, I think there's a lot of components of these discussions that you all actually agree on. And so I think it's good to focus on the things that are common and then try to figure out how to bridge some of those differences moving forward. So whoever wants to start, and I'm going to turn it around. Well, I'd say obviously we would love it if council would just refer our ballot measure to the November ballot.
As it currently stands,
Right, I mean, we would like that, yes.
with the November 2020 date in it?
So the typo? Yeah, no, obviously,
Yeah, very official typo.
obviously, well, since you as a council determine when elections occur, we couldn't determine in advance. So when you referred it, you would refer it based on what you have the power to do as council. We don't have the power to call an election date.
Can I ask a question? This is not specific to your initiative, but I'm a real fan of sunset dates because it gives the future some chance to check in. I think it's been very successful with PPRTA. People have looked at what they've done a good job of saying this is what we've done, and that's been re-upped. Would you guys be amenable to a sunset day? I know that you guys talked about it, and for me, I would like to see that on anything that we do. It's not just you that I'm saying I want to see that
We
with.
spent a lot of time talking about that, and I think that the biggest issue we have is that we don't know how long it's gonna take to pay off the library piece. So we could limit it to 30 years, but we couldn't really limit it to less than that based on our calculations, and so that's sort of what we're stuck with. So,
When you say library piece, do you mean the addition?
correct.
Oh, wow. Well, that's a totally different thing, but thanks for answering that.
Right, so, but we have discussed the idea of reallocating the funds, with the understanding that as things change, if we do want to reassess or change how things are distributed, at any point, particularly once the library's paid off, then we would talk about reallocation, which does take, some time to do, but is basically what our lawyer suggested. So we're actually following our lawyer's recommendation.
So any reallocation presumably would have to go back to the ballot.
Correct.
And when you say payoff, tell me how the library piece is gonna work. You mentioned the lease purchase. Tell me what you envision the library piece to look like.
So basically, we just did the math, and we just figured out how much it would take to pay off the I think what was the total, we said 2.6 million is what we, thereabouts, we determined that it would cost to make the library ADA accessible, to do the expansion, and so we are going for that amount to do that,
And so that would come up next year on the ballot issue,
potentially.
at some point. Won't happen this year.
So we probably have to complete all the construction documents and use all the funding potentially next year to do that, unless there's another way.
And if a bond issue doesn't pass, and you've done all this construction, what happens then?
I mean, I think it's gonna be continuing, we're gonna continue to apply that money toward the library piece.
How much money?
It's $125,000 a year.
Where did that number come from?
That's 1/3, so we split the amount up into thirds. So potentially this would generate about $300,000 a year. And so we split it up into thirds, so about 100,000 would go to the library, 100,000 would go to the Manitou Art Center, the Manitou Springs Heritage Center, and Vermont Castle. And the final third would be a competitive art, culture, and heritage grant.
And so council's going to make that decision separately
We
from the
would
ballot
work-
issue?
Correct, because ballot measures can only be legislative, they cannot be administrative.
Right.
So we would be working with the folks, yes, we'd be working with council to sign MOUs and put all those things in place in January, but in terms of the initiative, this is what we're proposing.
But the initiative doesn't propose that though.
The ballot measure language does not propose it, the
Right.
initiative committee is doing that proposal. just because of the restrictions around legislative and administrative. You
Right,
can't
so
do it
until-
in advance.
So until the council decides how that money's gonna be allocated, right now, there is no allocation, and it's up to council to make that
We'll be
determination.
working
There-
really closely, correct, with everyone
I
running
mean,
for council
there
next
is-
year. This would be done in January of next year, so we'd be working with
January.
the next, we'd be working with the next council.
There is some allocation in the sense that we've said that there's these 4 different
Right.
infrastructure
That's in the,
initiatives
that's
that would
actually in the
receive
initiative.
66%.
That we could include, yeah,
Right.
that we could include.
That's what
Right.
we've expressed
Right.
through the language.
So you had started the conversation with slightly different topic, and that was what we agree on.
Right, well, and basically about what, you know, what the purpose of, it's a working session, obviously decisions don't get made here, but it's an opportunity for the committee and council to look at those things that that you agree upon, and also what kind of outcomes you would like to come from this, not decisions per se, but in order, you know, it seems to me that one of the ones that I would hope would be a shared outcome would be a better understanding of each other's positions and maybe an openness to listening to information that you may or may not have had up until this point that might influence exactly where you are on a continuum. I also think that there is a process. I've had an opportunity to talk to some of you. I've had an opportunity to talk to Natalie about, you know, some of the things that maybe haven't been fleshed out as well for everyone here about, for example, it's exactly, you know, what the needs are and how this initiative addresses those needs. We've talked about the library. I've been at several different meetings where we've talked about the needs of the library and but exactly, you know, what the needs are of some of the other groups that are named here and what the vision is for Manitou in terms of what's come out of Plan Manitou and how this would support that vision moving forward. So I guess I'm thinking that based upon a lot of the documents, a lot of the decisions that have been made both by you and by past councils and brought to this group, there's actually a lot more common understanding and direction, and it seems like there is an opportunity for us through a discussion to bridge some of the gaps that we have had heretofore around, you know, what are some of the stumbling blocks around, not necessarily that council is the, I guess is the driver for the initiative. That can stay with the committee. I haven't heard, ideally, that would be perfect, but that's not required. But that there are things that I think everyone wants, that we can have that discussion.
Can I start with a couple things?
You bet.
Okay, one is, I think that a commonality is that, and council have to jump in if I'm correct on this, but we would all like a renovated library that's truly ADA accessible. I think that's a very basic thing that most people would probably agree to. Two is, I know I would very much like to collaborate on this initiative, but truly collaborate, not rubber stamp. I think I would also say that I do think that a very vibrant, creative, historic, heritage, arts and culture, or something, I think that those are absolutely essential to our community. And I would like to, as a city, provide some level of support to, ensure a future in those areas. So I'll just throw those three things out as, where I can easily start as,
Okay. Nancy, may I ask a question?
Yep.
When you say renovated library, are there any parameters around that? You mean
No, very basic. What I think is, I think everyone can agree to is a renovated library. I'm not talking about expansion because I'm not sure everybody can agree to that at this point, but I think a renovated ADA.
So are you saying an accessible and
ADA
usable?
accessible
Carnegie Building?
Carnegie. Well, at a minimum, the building, I think most of us would like to see it. I think I would certainly like to see it continue as a library.
Thank you.
Do you wanna confirm, Nancy, your thoughts? I would concur with you about ADA accessible. I've heard with you about the city in some fashion or form, supporting a vibrant, heritage, cultural, education, and arts community, those two things. When you say collaborate, not rubber stamp, I think this gets to some part of the matter, which is the city council's, responsible for overseeing the financial sustainability of the city, and as such, needs to represent, at any given point in time, the constituents' view on what is the allocation of resources. And so, that particular element of things is probably more of a council thing, because we're pretty well groomed in the need to do that. It's something less appreciated by citizens groups that have a specific project, and the more material it becomes as part of the budget, the more material that debate becomes. So is that what you're driving at with collaborate, not rubber stamp, that we couldn't release our fiduciary responsibility?
What, we can't, I mean, that's just given, we cannot relinquish our fiduciary responsibility. My,
Collaborate on it, though.
from a council perspective, I had hoped that the groups would come together and collaborate on the initiative. So that's just what I'm saying.
So collaborate, for me on the initiative would mean that, and Natalie's been really patient with me to look at various ways that we might find common ground relative to having an initiated citizens measure and a council's support of it. And I felt that the crux of it would be things like, what Susan mentioned, the time frame. The crux of it could be the dollar amount. Is it a 3% increase in tax, or is it a 1%? We just established the principle of a 1% increase in tax, and this is how it's going to work. And then basically, as we get into the first year, we see how these negotiations work with the new council in terms of who does what in terms of grant approval, who does what in terms of allocations to the three main bodies. So that's another way to look at it. And the third way to look at it, which when it first came up, my gut said to me, these money should come out of the general fund, period. Basically be a tax on the general fund, not a tax on our businesses, is another way to do it. And there's precedent for doing that, which is before the recession, the city always took 6% of their gross revenues, the gross revenues that would come in, whether it was property tax or sales tax, etc., and that would go into a special capital fund that would be only used for capital purposes. So this is something that legislatively we can do without changing tax rates. These are big items, not gonna be resolved in a work session. But to me, that's how we could get on the same page.
Well, and we discussed this, but
Yeah.
it would be, when the library was in the general fund, it was terrifying. But every year, we were terrified that something would happen and the library would have to close, because, and we're talking about the library, not the current building. And so every year we would spend a lot of time and energy,
Right.
you know, to make sure that the library didn't close every year. And so I think that what's happening is communities are finding ways to get our culture and heritage out of the general fund so that we're never competing with those other items. And so that's sort of where we're going with that. So for us, I think, and I can't really speak for everybody, but I think that would be very scary to think that we would try to put this initiative anywhere near the general fund. But that's actually, we are looking for a separate segment of income so that there's never that issue.
Dedicated revenue stream.
Yeah, I would just point out there's precedent for doing with the capital fund, there's precedent for doing with the Chamber of Commerce, where we allocate certain percentages of certain revenues, and those monies do happen. So it wouldn't be a given if it was a distribution from the general fund, that could be fixed by ordinance, this amount will be distributed. So it wouldn't necessarily fall into how the library is to operate, not necessarily. But these are,
I'm just saying that that's like, you know, there's words, and I think that's very scary.
yeah. So that one say is very complicated.
And scary.
Yeah. What's
Not
not
if
so
it's done by
complicated.
ordinance though, because what you're talking about is when everybody came and, you know, that was terrifying and awful, and I never wanna return to that. Part of that is none of those funds were guaranteed by ordinance. So at budget season, you came in fighting for the library and swinging at everybody else who normally you partnered with. The rest of the year, you were all working together, but suddenly at budget season, during a recession, it's horrible, and I agree with you. I was part of that whole thing, and I never want to do it again. Part of that is though that wasn't done by ordinance, like Ron recommended, correct?
Right.
So it's not up for grabs, the way it was in that time period, which was horrible. And I think that's what drove the voters to, you know, separate out the library and say, it's ridiculous.
Right, so then I guess the other thing would be that we feel like we found an easy solution, whereas yours is much more complicated.
So if we take your easy solution, we say, well, rather than a 3%,
Point
three tenths increase in tax, and we say, well, we're gonna start off with a baby step, we're gonna put it in a tenth of a point. We wanna get the infrastructure running to be doing the things that have been outlined, which have yet to be determined, which will be by memorandum of understanding. And then with time, if more monies went into that bucket, you would have established the process, which is undefined right now, right? It has to be hammered out first quarter of next year, or sometime during next year. So that's just another way to get there. $300,000 is a fairly big chunk to be opening with. The flip side of it is, next year, just say, we'll take a year to get this ready for the ballot, and next year take $300,000 out of the general fund and run the mechanism that you outlined. We take a one lump deal to get through this year, and then what needs to really be flushed out on this gets flushed out in the next 12 months. But this group knows, the citizens group knows, they've got the $300,000. And that would be a very simple way to do it.
Well, I think it's hard, because I think, again, we just really like this, so I don't know why we would do that.
And beyond that, you pointed out that sort of a lot of folks would be on board for just simply getting it to ADA accessibility.
And let me
As
just
a
clarify,
floor.
I was looking at lowest common denominator, what we
Yeah.
all could agree
Right.
was a requirement, not how to rewrite anything.
But shouldn't lowest common denominator be what this body approved and endorsed just 2 years ago? This is why, I see you shaking your head, but this is why, this is our fundamental challenge, is that there's an amnesia that sets in every 2 years. So we'll be dealing, I mean, this isn't, it's not a criticism, it's just an observation of the system as it's structured. And I've read some folks that have suggested that maybe we ought to organize this government slightly differently. But this is the fundamental problem, is that you're outlining a very reasonable gradated approach. And clearly I come from a regimented system, as befits my haircut. But, and so I can appreciate that. But we've been through this before. I mean, the library has been through this before. And,
I disagree, Matt. I don't think the library has been through this before, because there was no formal decision about funding. And there wasn't a formal decision about what the plan was to move forward. There was a concept, and perhaps the council approved a concept, but that's just a concept. That's my understanding of the approval process. There wasn't a funding mechanism nor a plan. And I think the assumption was it's a done deal, and that's not how I read it.
so it wasn't off a whim. The process started in 2015 with the city contracting with an architectural firm. It went all the way up through the beginning of 2017. It was over a 1.5-year process, which capped off, if you've seen the compendium of expenditures the city has made to repair that library building, the Carnegie building, over time. This has been a problem for quite some time, and I've pointed this out before, but it is the very last library building in a very long radius that is not ADA accessible.
No, I'm just questioning
So-
your assumption that it's a done deal. And I'm saying,
I'm not saying it's a done deal, but I would suggest that the city is at the goal line with having figured out what it should look like And I don't understand why we would
I
undo
can-
something that was
I
done
might
just
address
with the
that.
last council.
We've got a lot of feedback from various members of the community saying they don't want an expansion of the library. So that's why I was trying to start at the lowest common denominator
Yeah.
at, which is, I haven't heard anyone say they don't want the library ADA compliant. So that was where I was coming from.
And it's probably not necessarily furthering the discussion, talking specifically about the library.
Right.
We've had a couple of sessions about the library, and it seems there's a fundamental disagreement about exactly where we got to, in the past. I mean, I think there's some finite things around, you know, the concept design was there, et cetera. There's some disagreement about how clear it was about exactly what that direction was moving forward and whether or not we actually have any documents that say we were moving there. Obviously, there was a lot of discussion. I'm not the greatest facilitator because I have opinions, so pardon me if I get out of control a little bit, but anyway, to make it clear, it's not as if there wasn't a lot of discussion about this in the past. You know, one of the things certainly that would be part of, as I've talked with Natalie specifically about this, the initiative is really about, what would it mean moving forward and what the expectation was. I know, as I've talked to some of you, is, you know, the absence of some specific data around, you know, what the needs are and those kinds of things. And Natalie, you might talk just a little bit about, you know, what the plan was moving forward in terms of sharing information with the community and who's actually signing or not signing the document as it goes around and a request for support.
No, it's true. So I guess the first thing is that it's true. I've had 4 people not sign the ballot measure because of the library. And so at this point, that's running about 2%. Of folks have expressed some issue with the library.
Mm-hmm.
So we are not getting feedback from the folks that we're talking to that the library is an issue. So I just don't know what the numbers are there. I don't know how many constituents you're hearing from, but I feel like it's a small, loud group. And so
It
just
is
so you
my
know.
ward.
Yeah.
Okay, because that is my neighborhood. So if I live in Crystal Hills or another neighborhood, I'm not gonna understand the issues that my ward is concerned about. We have a school that lacks parking at drop-off and pickup. We have a neighborhood that's under inventoried for cars that, people that live in my neighborhood. My RPP is 55 spaces short. That doesn't count the people who are trying to get to the school.
So that'd be
But
great,
wait, just a
yeah.
minute, let me finish this, because I can get your 2% and I can see how that's gonna fly out there and everybody's gonna go, ooh, 2%, that's nothing. I would hate to see my ward not vote for your initiative because of this library issue, and that's what I'm hearing from my neighbors. It's not that they don't support history, arts, culture, the Manitou Arts Center. It's not that they don't like the library, for crying out loud. It's that you feel like you're backing them against a wall and you're saying it's this way or no way. And that's from a small group of people, because it's going to be the small group of people who live around the library. I didn't even mention the businesses that don't have parking for the businesses they own and their employees downtown that are also trying to park in that area. But at the end of the day, are we going to be 5% or 10%? Are we just not going to matter? That's for you guys to decide. But this is, you know, I love the library. If you live in my neighborhood, I'm there almost every day with my dog. When I moved here, I was at the library almost every day with my children. But for my ward, the 2% of your petition and maybe the 2% of the total vote, you are heaping things on us with this renovation that we are not prepared to handle. And you're not the only one. Others are doing it too.
This is.
Matt, hold on, please.
So I'm sorry it's passionate for me, because it's my
This was
ward.
an
If any of you weren't for those of you who don't represent my ward and my neighborhood, you may not be hearing this. But my ward wants me to tell you that they don't want to be forced to choose between supporting heritage, culture, the library, because if by voting for it, they're voting for an expansion. They want more time. They want more dialogue about this.
Well, that's the thing. I think we could totally meet with your neighborhood. I think that's
What will happen once this passes?
Well, I think the
It's,
other
you
part
know,
is that,
I don't know.
is that we've already been working with, and again, we just haven't been able to communicate all of this, but, once there's a roundabout at that space, we've actually already been working closely with the library on drop off and pick up, and they think they can make it much more efficient and not have any vehicles go around. They can just go up and go around in a circle and not actually go on your road. Like, we've actually already had conversations about how we can coordinate drop up and pick up more effectively once there's a full circle and you're not having to go all around the neighborhood for pickup. So I think those are things that we could really communicate that I think would help out a ton. And I bet there's a lot of little things like that that are not, you know, obviously there's still gonna be an expansion piece and obviously there's still gonna be ADA access. But I think that we can really coordinate traffic in a way that would be super impactful. And I don't think it's too late for that.
Can I please add, this is not a choice between parking for residents and the library / arts, culture, and heritage. It's not an either or choice. This is fixing one problem and then moving on to the next. So by removing this, getting this problem off the books, that everyone, I think, at least with respect to the ADA compliance at the library building, the Carnegie building, I think everybody acknowledges that's a problem. It's a sore thumb on the city. It would enable the city to move on to action some other issues, other infrastructure issues, so.
Council?
So, I don't go over my long-standing issues with this, well documented, but in the spirit of compromise, since that's, I guess, kind of why we're here, I would say that for me to support, council supporting this, one, I wouldn't be wedded to expanding the Carnegie building. I'd quite frankly look at Hiawatha Gardens. To me, it just makes financial sense. For $9 million, you get another white elephant off our books, and you get even more space and expansion. And you don't have some other things that are important to the community disappear. Like the sliding hat. It might seem like something small compared to books and knowledge, but it's a big deal. And so the other piece that I would need is the three groups would have to change their structure to have open and transparent board meetings and have their minutes posted on the city website and have when their meetings are posted on the city website and have their process for picking board members available to the public so that people know where their money's going and how to affect that change. Because otherwise, there's no accountability to any of these groups for these public funds. The groups can do absolutely anything, nobody knows how to get on these boards, etc.
I think that's super easy, we can add that as something we can totally.
Okay.
So when you say super easy, what do you mean by that?
That's just administrative stuff. I mean, that's just a matter of us.
To piggyback on that, the Colorado Springs Pioneers Museum, the historical organization, receives $1.2 million from the city of Colorado Springs annually, and they publish all that information to stay on the up and up. So this is not an unreasonable request, and it's something that's actually conducted normally.
How about,
Would that be part of an MOU? Is that how that works?
It's a relationship that they have. The city provides sustained funding
Right.
to the Pioneers Museum, which is only a percentage of their overall budget,
Right.
just as the relationship we're suggesting
Right.
should exist here in Manitou Springs.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out how that
Yes,
fits in
yes.
with what you're thinking about moving
Absolutely.
forward with this. It seems like that would be the subject of your MOU, right?
Well, hold on.
Around, okay,
Let's talk about this MOU, if you will.
okay.
So an MOU needs to be with an organization that has legal responsibility for their end of the MOU. And so other than perhaps having MOUs with each of the organizations, there's nobody to have an MOU with.
Right.
So yes, you could have an MOU with the MIC and the library and
Right.
so forth. You
Right.
could do individual agreements.
Right.
That would be what you'd have to do as
Right.
opposed to one.
Right, yeah, that's what I was thinking
It would be
of.
one for each organization.
One for
Right.
each organization.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
And so let me follow up, would the organizations be willing to divulge their financial information now?
Sure.
And the
It's all
plans,
our 990s are listed on the state.
and the plans of what you'll use this money for. I've seen nothing in terms of what these organizations need, nor how they spend it, so would
So I
that be
think that's,
possible?
and that's also part of our PR plan, so when we
Right.
start rolling out our plan on how we're going to again, encourage voters to vote for this. Each organization is gonna put together a one-pager, it's gonna outline, you know, what they offer the community, what their mission and vision is, all those sort of things. We can include, again, when they meet, we can include their 990, their last posted 990, that's easy. You know, I mean, they're all gonna have, I mean, we're all writing grants left and right? We have everything. We have all of our budgets, we have everything. I mean, it's, you can't operate without that. I mean,
So I would say for me, having that sooner than later would help me understand the needs.
so, so you personally, would
Yes.
you like to like come to
I'm-
one of our board meetings?
As a member of this council.
Right, I mean, I don't feel like, I mean, we can, but I mean, I don't feel like these groups necessarily need to get everything to council.
Well, if you're asking for my support, that's what I'm suggesting. Knowing the needs of the organization and how they would spend the money would help me understand.
Which is all part of our PR plan, and that's all going out August 20th though. I mean, that's where we're planning on rolling that out. So I think, I mean, I can see if they can move it forward, but I mean, at this point, I mean, I think, I don't know. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I can't, we're all putting together our PR plans, like,
Okay.
it's a little early, like, we weren't really planning on.
Well, it's not early if we're gonna collaborate and coming up with something that we can all agree and we put on the ballot.
Right.
It's not too early for that.
So you want us to prove to each organization to prove to you that we're worthy before you would agree?
Well, worthy's not the word I would use.
Okay.
I would say help me
Accountable?
help me understand the financial needs and how the money's gonna be spent. That accountability is, I think, was brought up here. And for me, as a representative, as someone representing the entire community, that accountability is
Yeah.
important.
Cause I would say we would probably have it to you by August 20th for sure, that's when we've asked for it, but.
Hold on, Doug, I see your hand back there. I'm gonna keep the conversation here for a moment.
No problem.
And we'll get back to this.
Yeah, cause like we got like a little rough draft of a one pager that the Art Center's working on. But I will say, like, Tim Haas emailed me right off the bat and asked for, you know, our budget, and I sent it to him right away. I mean, I can do that, but, you know, we're just putting together little info things and stuff like that. But I will say that so far, you know, talking to people, you know, they've not asked for our 990. They've not asked for that level of detail, that I think they are excited and really like what we're doing. And so I just wanna be really clear that again, you know, is this just because you personally want that, or is this something that the community is asking for? I don't know, I mean, it's
Well, I think the community deserves it if they're going to make an informed decision about how to use our tax money. I think that's part of what you would give them is
Yeah,
why
certainly.
that would be done. And
Yeah.
it sounds like you have a plan.
Right.
If you're asking me to make a decision, well, I'll wait then until I see that,
Okay.
which is fine.
What are you concerned about seeing? I mean,
I'm
like.
concerned about seeing
I
what the
mean, these
needs
are-
of the organizations are,
Yeah.
and more importantly, how the money's gonna be spent.
And I think that that's our job to sell to the community. I mean, that is where your vote as community members, that's where that counts. I think tonight, what we're asking is for you to refer it to the ballot, not necessarily to support it with your vote. That's up to us to sell, and all of our organizations. We're aware of that. We're asking for one thing tonight, to refer it to the ballot. That's what we're asking for. And if you refer it to the ballot as a council and choose to shoot it down as a voter, that's because we didn't do a good job of selling it.
Almost,
Yes.
and I'll put my
Sorry.
2 cents in, but I just think that, and it came about 5 years ago, when school board and us, we talked, and school board was going one direction, we were going another. There was things being put on the ballot we didn't know about, we couldn't work, and we kinda resolved that by starting to work together. And what I see, the same thing needs to happen right here today, is, the mayor and I had a discussion about something else the other day about, well, if I can support something, I need to know what it's gonna do. And you telling me tonight that part of this is going to be a roundabout, part of this is gonna be something for traffic flow with the library, it's gonna improve a lot of different things. If, granted, I'm a voter, but me as a council to support you, if I knew all those type of things before tonight, then I could sit here and go, oh, okay, yeah, this is really gonna move forward. And maybe the 2, 10, 5% or what of the people are out in the community saying we don't want anything with the library, I could sit there and go, well, along with the library, we're gonna be doing this, this, and this. And granted, you're gonna bring that up August 20th, but the
it's
concern
hard.
is right now.
Right.
So, and I think if we don't leave this, I mean, I don't wanna see this your group go off and go do this, and we're over here, and it's a total fight, and it shouldn't be. It should be to where we come out of this room going, okay, we don't agree on everything, we've resolved some things, but we're not gonna go out there and we're not gonna name call each other out in the street.
I
And
understand, yeah.
I see that's
Yeah.
kinda where we were going.
So can I ask, or point out at least, on a practical level, it seems like, so funding, for example, for the Manitou Heritage Center, as I understand it, they had asked for $10,000. And that's been turned off, or at least that's been declined. Am I correct in that?
For this year.
For this year,
Right.
and what was the reason for that?
Lack of funds, and they were gonna put it in the bank so they could accumulate it to buy a building. And the council wasn't really ready to make that decision, and so that's what my understanding of the request is, so they could just accumulate it for enough money to buy the building.
Okay.
And I think we weren't ready to go there.
But it was related to the fact that they're supporting this initiative. I mean,
Well,
at least that's the
I had
email
also, I had
that I
raised the
read.
issue for myself, saying, I'm not so sure we should give money if in fact there's other money available to them from.
So this is the value, so that $10,000, should you have decided to grant it, would have come out of the budget as it exists right now.
Correct.
There is value, I would suggest, in us generating the momentum in this community to create a separate pile of money in order to fund the Heritage Center. So that $10,000, for example, could go to parking in your neighborhood or now I understand that this is a trade-off, but that's what it seems to me we're proposing. We're not taking anything away, we're proposing to create something new that relieves some pressure on this council to be able to provide more goods and services to the residents in town. So that's the tangible value I can at least express right now in this moment, and I think it actually provides value to other problems that you've identified.
Councilwoman Elder's been patient.
Oh my God. I really resonate with pretty much everything everybody's saying. I want to go back to what Nancy was saying, is what do we agree on? I don't think Susan's ward, I've lived in that neighborhood, more money isn't going to help her issue. It's a space issue. More money is not going to help her. So, we all realize that the bathrooms are for little people at the library. There is no ADA access, and we can all agree on that. And I live in Ward 1, I too get feedback from people who don't want to see this happen. And that's my issue with it, is it's a done deal for the library. Boom, we're gonna do that.
Actually,
Well, the way I read it, let's just put it that way, that it's already a done deal, we're gonna blow out the building, we're gonna put in turnaround parking and all this stuff. And I think that upsets people. The building as it is like postcard beautiful. And it is, the sledding hill is very important, if you ask me and my children who grew up here and sled there. None of you guys live in that neighborhood. I mean, you don't really know the reality of living there day to day to day to day to day, right? And so,
I mean, I lived across the street from it.
well, so you should have a grasp of it if you lived on Duclos at all. And so, I would like to see more consideration of, yeah, let's get the money, let's, if we need to have a separate bucket of money, but let's not decide before we get it what's going to happen. I would love to see stacking of functions with Hiawatha Gardens. If you're handicapped and you're going to a library that's on a hill like this, that means you have to drive. There's no wheelchairing up that hill very often, and coming down would be even worse. And so, to me, if you're really concerned about the handicap, that's not even the right location. So it's a historical building, it's a beautiful building. Over at Hiawatha Gardens is a beautiful building inside a nasty, ugly exterior. And it could be a showcase of the whole community, have more space for the library, have the biggest bathroom you could ever want. There's just tons of space over there, tons of parking. There's other uses we could put the Carnegie building to without destroying the whole of it. I mean, to just put in the elevators, put in expanded bathrooms, that would be fine, and that would be, to me, all that that building would need to be something else, like the city hall here. We don't have enough office space. What a great place to put the administration. What do you think of that, Larry? Wouldn't it be great to have an office over there? I'm just saying, that's just an idea, because it's gonna be too small for a library unless we put a huge addition on it that's bigger than the building is right now. If I understand what I saw, it's bigger than what the building is now. You say yes and you say no.
It's
It's
equal
equal
size,
size.
I mean, it's basically equal size.
Okay, that's still too big in my opinion, that's like,
So,
and so I don't like tagging the money for that project, you know, right now. I mean, you guys have already decided where it's gonna go, what we're gonna do. We're gonna do this building that the people that talk to me don't wanna see happen.
you voted
So-
to endorse the architectural plans 2 years ago.
I think I might have voted against it.
No, you voted, it was 6-0, we had one abstention, that was the man that owns the property next to the building.
When was this? In 2015?
February 2017, less than, a little over 2
Did
years
I
ago.
really? I'd have to check that because I have been voting against it and talking about the trees and talking about not wanting more.
Hold on.
Yada yada.
I think what they're asking, I don't think we're gonna debate the expansion tonight. I don't think that's the
No,
conclusion.
I'm just letting them know where I stand, and so I can be done. I just agree that we should start where Nancy said, what can we agree on? And let's not carry all those plans into this, and just go for the money, and then bring it, bring it to that community. You know, door to door, hey, this is what we're doing, what do you think? And go to Randy last, cause Randy really didn't want it.
So, as I read this ballot issue, it is not locked in. It's very specifically, it says nothing about the library expansion. That decision will need to be made separately
I would
by
hope so.
the city council. There is nothing, as I read it, nor is there any money, as I read it, allocated for library expansion. Tell me if you
There would
disagree.
be a specified pot of money that would generate $300,000 a year, plus you have $300,000 in an
66%.
account right now.
Si-
Yes,
66%
200,000 roughly, yes.
goes to the 4 groups without allocation. Library could get $1, the other groups could get $199,000.
That would be one,
Without an
that would be a wonderful,
That,
wonderful way of
but
going
right
about it,
now,
yes.
that's what you're asking to put on the ballot, which is the focus of the
That's correct.
conversation, is what are we being asked to put on the ballot? And that is, what's written here. No more, no less. Not the conversation about should we or shouldn't we expand the library. That's not what we're putting on the ballot. That's not what you're putting on the ballot.
Because we were restricted from, we were
What-
precluded from
whatever
doing so.
reason, it's not on the ballot and it's not what we're considering.
That's correct, but
Okay?
In
I mean,
terms
it-
of
but
what
that's-
people assign for, that's what
yeah.
I'm understanding.
we'd be very happy to confront that problem should this vote pass. I'll put it that way.
So, I think the question is what information, or is there any other information that the council would need to feel comfortable in putting this issue? Cause as I understand it, the language isn't changing from your perspective. Is that right?
So, really, I like it.
It's a take it or leave it language, put it on or not.
Well, I think it's not even us, like, people are really excited about it.
Well, whoever's negotiating, that's what I'm hearing, is here's the language, and what I'm asking council is the other information that you all need or would like, to consider, or you could say no, you're good, but the question is there other information you'd like or need to consider with regard to this language as it's written? And I've expressed one, and that is, I'd like information about the organizations, and more particularly, how they would spend the money, what's the work plan as to how they would spend the money, that would be really helpful, and I don't mean the 34%.
Right, because obviously we're talking about
Yeah.
100 years out, so. we
I'm
can
talking about the
obviously-
4 organizations that are there.
Right, what the needs are of
And you
those
can eliminate the
organizations,
library
what
because
their-
that's been separately.
Right.
what their new
And
template
obviously,
is.
they're gonna highlight things that they can't get through grants and donors and other things, so it's gonna be all about hard to fund things. So the 14 toilets that we have to maintain.
Water heaters.
The 7 furnaces.
Furnaces.
It's gonna be those kinds of things. So as long as, so the less the things that are not sexy are the things we're asking to fund. So those are the things that, the saw blades and the, toilet paper, all that good stuff. So that's at least for the art center, so the least set plungers, 14 plungers, I mean, it's crazy what I order every year. So, anyway, so it's a lot, so that's what we're going for, right? The things that are super fun and all the good stuff we get, you know, the programming, we get money for that, we just do not get money.
I think one of the key things to remember as I'm kind of going through this is that I know there's a lot of passion, particularly around the library and the future of the library. But the way that this reads, it's still, even the allocation still requires council approval.
Absolutely.
And so I guess, you know, there is a place for council to be part of that discussion that doesn't preclude support of a direction around supporting these other items, whether it's just, to Nancy's point, just the ADA compliance around the building. It seems to me there's a whole nother discussion that needs to happen about the library and around how, you know, and probably, you know, I don't know, probably not with this council given the time frame, but how communities or how parts of the city get engaged in those discussions. We have some really talented people in this community around public engagement and that can probably help that happen. There's enough diversity of opinion here that I don't think you're gonna have everybody walking out going, yay, I'm happy with the solution, but at least you can have an engaging conversation and with all of those issues out there, and then it either ends up being a vote or it ends up, you know, at a council level that represents, you know, what their constituents are telling them about what needs to happen. So I guess I wanna be clear as I understand the issue, both from you and from the committee, that should not necessarily preclude, with the exception of the information, Mr. Mayor, that you're requesting that they're planning on providing anyway. It sounds like, that what happens with the library, even though it's listed on here, is not decided. It can't be based upon the fact that council is always gonna be part of that discussion.
Right, but here's the risk. First of all, my board would never begrudge you those plungers. Again, we don't want people getting the wrong idea though. So there's two ways to cut this, right? The one that I laid out for you passionately, which is the hardest part of being on city council, which is wanting it all and not being able to get it all. And that's, you know, my voice is breaking because of that, because that's really hard for me. Second thing is, if people are voting for this because they're for the library expansion, and that's how, I'm not saying you would do this, but that's how it gets sold to them, and 4 years from now, a nasty council votes that expansion down, people are like, oh, I funded that, and those horrible council people didn't vote for it, because that's what happens. So you need to make sure you're not selling this ballot initiative as a decision on the library, in my opinion. And if you're out there and people are saying, yeah, I'm voting for this because I support the expansion of the library, but it's really not in that ballot language, see how that's gonna go? I mean, I'm just asking you to be very careful, because you don't wanna lose votes or gain votes for all the wrong reasons.
So we would have to decide to change that, because at this point, every single person that has signed this believes that that is what we are doing. That is correct.
That's very scary for me.
That's scary for me too. I think that's not only setting up the future city council for disaster, I think it's misrepresenting where we are in the situation.
No, it's not. So Frank, it's handing resources to the next city council. I understand where you stand, but it's handing the resources and then a clear mandate to achieve some end. This is doable.
This vote wouldn't tell us
This
a
is
mandate.
doable.
This vote wouldn't tell me anything about the library expansion.
I
Wouldn't
know
tell me anything.
it's very hard, and I know that, like, we found an example right now in Charlottesville, that they've got an art and culture ballot measure that they're putting on in November, and it doesn't actually have the word art in it. That ballot measure language is incredibly limiting in terms of what you can do and say, so it's not unusual for it to be like this, unfortunately.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes, 6 minutes.
Charlottesville?
But
Yes.
no.
Doug, I may or may not get to you. Hold on there, hold on.
Natalie,
I'd like to hear what Doug has to say.
I understand.
just quickly, I know you've talked to some external organizations about matching, if this passes, if there's matching opportunities. What level of commitment are they expressing to you? The certainty of the commitment and how much?
So Elkamar, said, we love libraries, we love Carnegie's, come back to us when you cast your ballot measure. In terms of an amount, they did not specify. I think we'd probably be asking for about 150,000, is my guess. The Gates Family Foundation, we reached out to them, they're also interested in capital projects. I've not gotten a number for them as well. They're actually like I can't meet with someone who
Okay,
have an
I just-
opportunity, someone
just
who's
curious,
fixed
thank
with
you.
that. But we're probably looking at about 150,000, would you say from Elkamar?
A one-time.
Correct.
Okay.
So before we conclude this, what other information, if anything, would council need or want in order to help us formulate a decision about putting this on the ballot? That's really the focus.
I just wanna let council know that we are having an executive session on this next week to discuss this with our city attorney, because there are a lot of issues that we as a council need to discuss surrounding this as well, that I wasn't aware of, so.
And my thinking is, and I'm open to council's suggestion, in theory, I think we should have you there. I think you should know what we know.
That's okay, but I will say our attorney's working really closely with your attorney.
Well, they've
so-
talked,
Mhm.
he may not agree
Mhm.
about the implications of things. But it'd be nice if we had one understanding of what that is, as opposed to our attorney saying one thing, and your attorney telling you another thing, and maybe they're different, maybe they're the same, we don't know that. But it would be nice to have that conversation, I guess I'm asking council, whether you would be open to having them participate, having their lawyer, our lawyer, and get it out on the table, here are the problems, here's how it is, or not, here's how to solve them, let's get it done.
I'm out of town Monday and Tuesday, but we'll
Oh, this is
participate.
next Tuesday.
Before we close, we have a couple questions,
It's
actually.
2 weeks.
Yeah,
Oh, on the sixth.
Oh,
That's
Tuesday.
if not.
okay,
No, it's on the sixth.
okay.
Right, and our attorney was gonna call in for that. But if council is amenable, we can set that up so that you all can participate. It wouldn't seem to me to do any good for us to learn this without you all learning that.
I would definitely support that.
Anybody else wanna weigh in on that?
August sixth,
Yes.
I can support that.
Okay, so you're just track when we're gonna have that. Probably are we gonna do that after the meeting, or we'll do that at 5 o'clock, if Jeff is available? No? After the meeting?
After.
Normal meeting, okay, so our executive session will be after, and we'll try to, as soon as we get the agenda figured out, tell you what time. Okay. I think we're done. Yes, Mr. Edmondson?
Yeah,
Real
Douglas K. Edmondson, 750 Road, Manitou Springs, as a sitting board member for the Heritage Center. Okay, I wanted to let you know that what our interests are, yes, building acquisition, archives, money to help with everyday operations. Just came off of a board meeting Sunday. Unfortunately, the $10,000 that we did not get this year was not for being pigeonholed for the acquisition of our building. We have separate activities that do that, including the Brew Festival, that we need that money for our everyday operations, and we're struggling right now to keep our head above water when it comes to paying rent, when it comes to keeping the lights on, when it comes to financing archives. We have rotating exhibits. We're not static exhibits like the Marymount Castle where everything's just the same all the time. And so it takes a lot of money and a lot of time to do that. And we're struggling with volunteers because we're underfunded.
I apologize if misrepresenting it. It wasn't made clear to me then. I apologize if I had a
Okay, well, I
misunderstanding
appreciate that.
about
Thank you.
that $10,000.
Yeah, it really
Thank you.
had an effect on us.
Thank you.
Just, I made a clarification on my comments. I was not aware that the first 66% was also tagged as a special fund to be allocated by council. So in reading this ordinance, what we're really doing is we're setting aside a special fund, which may or may not be allocated in a given year. There's nothing saying that it would be. It could just roll forward $300,000 a year and accumulate. But council has the sole discretion as to how to distribute either the 66% for capital and operations for the 4 centers, or 33% to grants. So
the total amount is 100%.
correct. So what I would suggest the group think about is not setting the target so aggressively in the first year of this ordinance. In other words, start this at a seed money level. There's precedent for doing this. We have an environmental ordinance that we passed, and we put, against all our environmental challenges, we put $20,000. I mean, that is just a drop, but that's just to at least get something seeded. And the same is true with this, but I think the $300,000 is a big bite. And the concept I absolutely support, putting money where our words are, where our vision is, and so forth and so on. I think it needs to go through a balancing act of, is it $300,000 against multi-millions of dollars infrastructure we know we need to do, and how do we get that all sorted out? Last year, the fire department initiative was defeated. Why? Because we didn't have a capital plan, and it seemed like $4 million to $8 million was an awful lot of money against a big backlog of capital projects. Now, agreeably, this is a lot smaller, but the fire department, using it as an example, has come back with a much scaled down project that will be $500,000 maximum for the city, and that's a huge difference between the 4 to 8 million. So I think the whole point's been discussed here quite a bit. It would really behoove everybody to communicate clearly with the community, this is monies in these two buckets, council will be allocating it.
Right.
So, you know, forget about the notion it's married to the library, forget about the notion it's, you know, going to the Historic Museum or Marymount Castle. That's all up for grabs. And do you really want council allocating that much money really becomes a question, and then that's a voter judgment. But I think we all do ourselves a favor if we make that really clear to people.
Yeah, I just think too, I just wanna remind, we're all just, you know, citizens of the community that are really excited by this, and, you know, like I said, we've been working on the library for 17 years, we've been working on the Art Center for 10 years, so I just wanna remind everyone that this isn't new, that, you know, I've been trying, you know, I was saying, I've been losing sleep for a decade trying to figure out how to fund things, so I just want you to know that this is not us sort of just randomly waking up and deciding to do this. This is something that we've been strategically looking for, and when this opportunity presented itself, we believe this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I just don't see it being available next year. You know, so I just want you to be aware that, like, it could go away so quickly, and, you know, and I do not see another opportunity, and we're just really excited by this moment. I mean, that I just couldn't even believe it when it happened. You know, that.
And this is an opportunity for us to take care of our organizations in time, in this town. And I think that that's really valuable, because we can't come to you every year asking for this kind of support. We're trying to create a system in which we can take care of ourselves. That's what we're looking for.
So, do you have questions? We're gonna wrap this up, because we've been an hour, so do you have any last minute questions? I think you had some questions.
Oh, yeah, sure, we do. So in terms of a continued community engagement around the Carnegie Building piece in particular, we were wondering if we can access funds that the city has from those individual donors for that particular piece. So it would not be for the match initiative, but it would be for reaching out to your neighborhood for discussions around the library Carnegie conversation.
Is that related, I mean, do you need that answer tonight?
This is
Can
the
that-
200, this
can
is
that
the
go under
$290,000.
the-
You can't make a decision anyway tonight in a
So
work
how about
session,
this, how
so.
about, could you submit to us a request? I think we need to figure out what the process is for accessing that money in general. Use this as an example, and then we can use whatever process we create for future requests, because we should have a process for figuring that
Are
out.
there other questions?
Yeah, and then beyond that, you raised.
Wait, hold on, is everybody okay with that, with creating a process? Using this as a first example, and then using whatever process we create on whatever future requests there may be. Is that?
I'm okay with putting it on an agenda to discuss.
Yeah. Put it on agenda.
So, in the spirit of ratcheting this down a little bit, you heard testimony tonight on the Heritage Center. It seems like, I would appreciate it, or I think we would appreciate it if you would reconsider that money to fund their ongoing operations, the $10,000 request, The message that I saw related to that money was that it appeared that it was punitive for their participation in this initiative.
No, October is when we said no.
Right.
It was a budget
So,
decision.
That wasn't,
Absolutely.
No, I raised it last.
Oh, then
At
that
our
was
first
the year
reading.
budget, but the very initial thing was October.
the description they received was the council will not consider this at this time due to the petition going
No,
and with the Heritage Center as the beneficiary.
no,
That-
that happened.
that
That's,
I had raised the question whether it would seem appropriate to give them money now, if in fact their needs were going to be met with this ballot issue.
if that's the
I
case,
had raised that
then-
question.
but-
There wasn't an answer to
It
it,
was not punitive.
but
Okay.
there was a question raised about, hey, maybe they're gonna be getting $50,000, $60,000, $70, we don't know what the need is.
We just felt bad if we were hurting the organizations we were trying to help.
I don't think so.
No, I can say as far as me, as one council person,
No.
that was, decision was made last year at budget time. It had nothing to do with
And then-
any of this.
And to be, and also there, that support, that financial support, if this ballot measure were to pass, they won't receive any funds until September of next year, of 2020. So,
Anyway,
The second matter is one of our, close members on this, board.
Excuse me, by the way,
Yeah.
we will consider the budget on second reading on the 6th of August. And so the budget will be finalized at that point, hasn't been finalized.
Okay, that would be appreciated, thank you, I'll be there.
The amended list.
The amended mid-year budget.
Yeah.
Don't take that as a positive or negative.
Oh, I know.
I'm just telling you the final decision.
You know, we're just doing a lot of robbing Peter to pay Paul. I mean, we have the Brewfest is our big one, you know, and it costs so much to operate the Brewfest and do it, and we, you know, are able to raise just a couple of $1,000s a year to put towards our building fund, and the rest of everything we bring in is just to keep the lights on there, basically.
So, beyond that, as on an individual level, one of our close members that's collaborated with us is a city employee. So just to clarify, is it appropriate for a city employee in their spare time, non-work hours, not using city resources, not using city email, to participate in this project? Because it's our understanding that this person feels as though it's been expressed that that's not okay. And as a
Again,
government
I felt really
employee,
bad
yeah,
about that, so.
we
That's her decision to do.
yeah.
Or if she's represented as being part of the planning committee, that's a problem. Because if she represented, it's her name, there's 5 people on the planning committee. She's one of them,
Why?
So the founder of
Why?
the Heritage Center can't be on the planning?
they're not a city employee. I'm saying that the city employee's name, is the city employee's name gonna be on a list of the 5 committee members?
I mean, she was.
She was,
But-
and what I'm
But it
suggesting.
didn't say city, it didn't say city employee.
But it didn't say not city employee, she is a city employee. So it's unclear if her name is on there, is she doing this on behalf of the city or not?
She's not representing herself as a city employee, and as such,
What I-
it doesn't,
I think
it's
the point
irrelevant.
was how it's presented to the public.
Okay.
So,
I think the question was what she does on her spare time, does on her own, is fine. Her name on things,
So we could we could work on the language,
But-
so whether it's representing the Heritage Center, or we could say not representing the city of Manitou Springs, like what we would need to do to do that, or?
how about not just keep her name off of anything?
no, that's not okay.
That's not okay.
No, that's not
You
okay.
want her name,
Oh my god,
No, that's
weird,
not
I
okay.
mean, it's not, I mean.
from an
why?
HR perspective, that's just not okay.
It's,
It should be very
she's
simple.
First Amendment
What's
rights.
in the personnel manual related to
I was
this?
about to say,
That's
that's
what
just did a
happened.
personnel
Done.
manual, and if we didn't cover it, we should.
Yeah.
well, the personnel manual, I don't think would address a ballot issue that the city council may or may not support. And the representation that a city employee is representing on behalf of the city.
She's clearly precluded from listing her title as a city employee.
And we would never
It's
do
her
that.
So
It's
but
her
her name,
It's her name,
Standalone.
but
that's illegal.
Right.
I mean, I hate.
I think we all have a right to, on our own time, do
Yes.
what we want to do. Hopefully, we don't, do things that are bad for the city's image, right?
Yes.
But, from a standpoint, we all have rights.
As a fellow government
Yes,
employee.
and I could look
have the
if
same
there's any
restrictions.
rules on exactly what they can and cannot do to make sure she's within those limits, and I can let you know.
And we've been very careful, because we're doing the exact same thing with all the library employees,
Yes.
that PPLD employees cannot, in their working hours or using their their work emails, doing, so we've been working, there's a lot of moving parts with this.
Sure.
We're working with a ton of people that cannot, do things
I think in
very specific ways.
with
involving
respect to
their work.
transparency, her name has to be on there.
Yeah, so
As a
let me look
citizen.
into with HR if there's anything that needs to be concerned for her. But I think on her own time, she gets to,
We've been,
play
on
like she
our end,
wants
I
to.
feel like we've been super careful.
Has she been directed not to participate in this organization?
No.
I
No?
think those,
You and me, I haven't
Yes.
directed her one way or the other. I haven't had any
The direct-
communication.
Okay.
I raised the issue about her name being out there as would that give people the impression that the city is taking a position on this issue? I raised that question.
Okay.
those
To
are-
me, it gives a very clear impression. Legally, she should be able to do exactly what she's able to do legally.
And she was never told she couldn't.
Okay, as long as that's clear, because I think that
From
that's the
me.
impression that was
Yes.
left, and that's an unfortunate impression.
Yes. But I will look into if there's any, issues involved and how she should be, listed. But
Cause we
my-
certainly wanna do it correctly. We
Sure.
feel really bad that somebody who's been working on this kind of thing for 30 years finally has this opportunity and they can't participate, and it just, again, I felt bad.
Okay, let me look into that and make sure everything is good. and I'll
She's
get
been
back.
working really hard.
Okay, last couple,
I
Susan.
have one last question for you guys. Councilman Warren, Councilwoman Elder raised the issue of Hiawatha Gardens and no one responded. But we are having that on the agenda. So if you guys would stay for that discussion, if you can, then that discussion, perhaps you could answer those questions then, and that would close out this time session.
Anything else? Thank you guys. I do wanna thank you for the work, the passion. I know I've raised a lot of questions. That's just my nature. And I've raised a lot of questions because of the hat I wear here, in part representing you and you and you. And so please bear with me when I ask those questions. It's not that I'm not supportive of your organization and the library. I think I've expressed that loud and clear. But my job on your behalf is to make sure that we do things on behalf of the entire city. That's my role. In January, we won't have that role. Right now.
I know we were thinking actually we were gonna have an opening on our Art Center board.
So keep that in mind, please. Please don't take my questions and my prodding and my desire for more specificity for how this is gonna work, how the money's gonna be used, for anything other than trying to do my job as your representative. That's all. And anytime you have questions about that, reach out to me. Don't make assumptions. Just reach out, and I'm glad to. We've had conversations, and I'd be glad to continue those. So, thank you. Anything else? Thank you, guys. And someone will confirm with you, it occurred to me that I need to check with, Jeff Parker. He may not want that. He's very careful about who he gives legal advice to.
Well, this be annoying, like our lawyer's also Jeff, but it's Jeff with a G, so I don't know.
Right. So let me confirm that. Let me talk to Jeff Parker. And maybe the two will just talk. Maybe that's the best way to handle it, as opposed to putting Mr. Parker in a position of giving legal advice to someone who's not his client. So as I thought about that, let me confirm that.
Okay.
Leah, do you know how to pull up our packet? No, but we'll go play. Do you?
Go to the city website.
It should be,
Go to the city website.
Okay.
And I didn't bring my,
Over there? Okay.
All right, we're gonna call item 2, Cog Railway and artifact status. We do have 20 minutes. We've used about 13 minutes of that, but we'll
okay,
hopefully
so
20
there's a
minutes.
couple, I think I'll just like kind of carry these around, because there's two in particular that I'm gonna want.
I apologize, we have a family situation that's come up, and we're not gonna be able to stay. Move at the next possible time, be for us to contact you. We don't have a date, if you're worried about the brochure, we don't have a final date on that.
Our next meeting is August 6th. That is a regular.
So there would be another,
The work session would be, well, that could come at the regular meeting.
right.
On August 6th. That is
Well,
our next
without speaking to people I need to speak to,
sixth agenda?
Yes.
Or 1 week after that?
No, the August sixth, and I can't imagine that it's gonna be a problem, having the city on social. We don't know what capacity that's gonna be in, and that's fine, but, I'll talk to Lisa tomorrow.
Okay.
So, and I apologize.
Okay, we'll add you in the August.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, thanks.
That's it, yeah.
Is that the one you wanna cut? Okay.
And go to the bottom and pull the briefing if you would.
Yeah.
There you go, copy.
Cool. Alright, Doug, you're gonna join me.
Where am I going?
You're gonna sit there.
Am I gonna sit up here?
Yeah, we're
Okay,
kicking
I'm
him
gonna
out.
sit up here. Sure, I wanna do this. Oh, I'm coming over here.
No, just sit up there, we're gonna go through the thing. Right? You know? Hey, Doug, sit down.
Hello. Okay, how are you? Good.
Alright, we can just start going through. So, I guess basically, we've had an additional meeting since the last time we came to council, and we really wanted to really start narrowing things down, that, you know, as we all know, time flies, and when it comes to moving large cog trains, that could be an issue. So, yes, we had our last community meeting on July 10th. I don't know how many people, there weren't a ton of us, maybe
Dozen.
Dozen? And it actually worked out really well. We had a PowerPoint, we presented all of these different sort of images. So again, we've got visitor center, we've got meeting rooms, we've got museum classrooms, we've got bridges and libraries and historic displays. We've got, let's see what else is on here. We've got ginormous sculptures, we've got coffee shops, and then we've got gardening and potting sheds. And so basically, and then we had additional feedback from people, so we can consider a variety of things. And I would say it felt like when we all came together, the answers seemed oddly obvious. That we all kind of came together, and you know, obviously cost was an issue, location,
Right.
vandalism, the ability to respect the historic nature of the cog trains, incorporate some artistic elements, involve the community in the process, and all those different things. So sorry, I'm like just flying through the. I don't even. So again, you know, like the durability, because some of the ideas, like we love the idea of like the gardening shed, but we realized that it would just sort of rust and break down over time. We love the idea of the bridge, but we realized we'd have to actually just take apart almost the entire structure. It would literally just be a shell, and you know, some of the historians.
It would, the
follow
cog
along,
won't support that.
think about
It would
that.
have to be a bridge under, it would have to be supported with its own bridge.
So we're to the first recommendation. Do you want to talk about the first recommendation?
So the first recommendation was a combination of a static display at Higginbottom Flats, Western Gate, kind of pull people off the highway, give them something to look at, get them in town, bring them down through Rainbow Falls, western side of town. And Concrete Couch and Steve Wood had give us a conceptual. It could easily be surrounded with a fence. One of the things that's nice about this is that it would be a descriptive display. There could be some signage, and also what's good about this is that the maintenance profile on this would be very low. We're not dealing with an operative vehicle. You don't have to worry about motors, engines, things of that nature. This is a more modern vehicle, unlike the steam engine that's at the corner out here. So maintaining it would be very easy with decals and jet spraying as far as painting it. And since it's of aluminum construction, it would have a long life. And if there was any breakage when it came to the glass, whatnot, it could easily be replaced with plexi sheets because they're flat sheets, very inexpensive, very easy to do. Also, this would be you know, hallmarked by a concrete couch effort. And the Heritage Center, I've already discussed with that board, again, my board, And I've come up with the idea that it would be very easy to have a subgroup that could be part of an attachment of the Heritage Center, which I also have a subgroup that's attachment for that for plaque restoration. We're getting ready to do the Duclos plaque, but we can call it the Friends of the Cog Railway, and it would be an organization that would be strictly there to raise money and put together funds and functions to keep the car maintained. Particularly in a static display like this, when there's no real usage in the vehicle itself, again, the maintenance profile will be very low. So
this concept really floated to the top fairly obviously on both the webpage and the various groups that have met to talk about it. We did communicate with Steve Wood. He's still on board and excited about the prospect. Doug, you might want to talk a little bit about your background and why we asked you to join us.
Well, I'm obviously, as a lifelong resident and my involvement with the Heritage Center, my knowledge of history, but I also am a rail enthusiast and travel to extents to see everything from modern systems. I've been monitoring the progress of the Cog Railway. Unfortunately, they recently had an accident up there, to as far as going to Cheyenne to watch them bring in a large steam engine that was just recently restored. And I know these cars and these systems very well, so it's something that I can easily take the lead on as far as maintenance and that sort of thing, and do would be.
And the price is right.
And the price is right, $20,000. As we all know, Steve's a real get her done kind of guy, and
That doesn't include moving the cog trains though.
Yeah.
And have you identified, would this go on the city-owned property that's owned in conjunction, let's say, for flats, or would it go on other city property?
Mike Mayo has done a lot of research on that, and his proposal at this time is that it goes on what the city owns.
Just the city-owned property. There is separate piece.
Because Save the Flats at this point in time is, has not expressed a lot of, support to have any.
That's why I asked the question.
So now that could change, but we have been working very deliberatively on this, and, there's no.
But there is a piece of property that could be used.
Mike has done the research and indicated that there is a piece of property that we could easily use.
Is it the property or is it Topeka Avenue?
It's Topeka Avenue.
So Topeka Avenue's a right of way up there, right?
I can only tell you what Mike has told me, and he says that this is a very good,
There's another piece besides the Save the Flats piece. We own a piece separate from that.
For some reason I thought they were both jointly owned.
No, one is, the other is.
My understanding is that it's
Mike has submitted all, we've done the paperwork, we just didn't put it on the board.
Okay, I just was curious.
Moving on, I guess their second recommendation.
And I would say that pretty much everyone we've talked to so far is supportive of keeping both cars. So we did come up with the second course of action.
And this, I would just like to highlight the lower image here, just because we talked about how this looks a lot like Hiawatha Gardens.
Yeah, and so, and
this has a coffee shop.
And as memory serves, now that you've mentioned it, Nancy, it's been the better part of almost 30 years, but I have been to that particular facility. And it's wonderful how they use it. Again, it's attached to the building, it's displayed. You would have proper display of the cog engine / car, but it also could be functional as a coffee shop. And we also feel as the Heritage Center that certain artifacts would be displayed in the car at that time above. Again, interpretive signage, so on and so forth. So you get a usefulness out of it without having to build a facility, but you also get another outlet for items to be displayed. Again, like the Heritage Center has very limited space at this point in time. Archiving is very important to us, but I'm always finding something new to clutter up the place. So I guarantee you we'll have some more artifacts.
And we also asked Laura what they're doing with the car down at the Widner Group, and they have not decided, but they do have RFPs out to convert it to a coffee shop, a VIP box. I don't remember what else, but they will share their cost estimates to convert the car to those various options. But they don't anticipate those cost estimates until September. So,
and we've reached out to Story Coffee a couple times to kind of get a feel for what they're doing. I don't know if you're familiar with Story, but they're sort of
Acacia
based
Park.
off Acacia Park, right? And again, that's a public-private partnership.
It could be done fairly inexpensively as long as you don't use gas and as long as you don't use live milk. That's the big one as far as the health department goes. So as long as you use hot plates, and then everything else can be pretty much piped and powered up fairly
I
inexpensively.
definitely consume milk in that building, so I know what's happening.
Don't have to bring your own.
But no, and I think, the other piece was that we discussed the idea that if it was in a situation where it could not be plumbed, that we could have the conversation around turning it into, again, that museum piece and really highlighting that and potentially a meeting space. So just that idea that it can be a coffee shop, meeting space, and museum, or it can just be sort of a meeting space and museum, depending.
Well, the engines have been removed from them, so, and they are built almost, believe it or not, like an RV. They're built with a sandwich style.
So the group's,
Structure.
thought was to put it in the vicinity of Hiawatha Gardens. Haven't come up, determined, it's a preliminary recommendation. And then these were some of the other, Doug already mentioned creating a Friends of Manitou Springs Railway Cars and Artifacts.
There's a mid-year budget request. today.
There's potential for, I didn't bring this up last week because we didn't meet until after that.
Yes.
But, we might wanna think about funding, particularly Concrete Couch, at least something this year. We could put it off too, I was not sure, but just a thought.
So my question is, if you were, the council said, hey, let's do something up at Higginbotham's, how long would that take to be complete?
I have to talk to Steve.
When we talked with Steve, we gave him the, timeline and he said he could do it within that timeline.
Is Chi's here, so Chi actually is also, to represent Concrete Couch today, Steve's in Rhode Island, but, I don't know, do you have any estimate, would you be doing it, do you think, did Steve tell you as a Fab Lab project, or would it be, So, so I think that's kind of a.
Yeah, the city already has rail, and, attaching the car to the rail is easy enough. The bedding or the ballast, there's the correct terminology that it would be resting on, at a slight incline, could easily be brought in, just inside of a day or two, and graded, very, very simple. Once the train is put in place, it'd be welded to the track in place, so there would be no movement to it, no safety issues, things of that nature. And I think it also opens, from the way I think, is somebody who's coming down a highway and say, oh, there's Manitou, but they see something that's gonna get them off the road and say, let's go into town and get a sandwich. Next thing you know, $100 later, they're spending money on our town.
So Gary, I would say that if council's interested in us pursuing these two ideas, we would put together a timeline and budget for each and provide that to you ASAP.
Well, I think that's the only way we get anything going is that we need to move, or we'll be talking, this will be talking about 3 years, we'll be talking about this going, well, 2 years ago, we should have moved them off that property that we
Right.
parked them on.
Yeah, that's why Steve would be involved. He's like, I said, I've known Steve for 30 years. He's a real gung-ho, get her done kind of guy.
I'm also Connect 14.
Oh, good.
Yeah. School
What was that?
Work with Connect 14 as well, so do some of the after-school stuff.
I have a question about this coffee shop option. I know that Leslie can probably speak to this, but I just seem to remember my time on the chamber board, there was a lot of people came in to book tickets on the COG. Was that true? It seemed like a lot.
It used to be when we did that, before they went to all online ticketing.
Oh, okay, so
we
that's
did
slowed down.
Thousands and thousands a year.
But the COG isn't interested in partnering, I guess, at all with the second proposal that is sort of the coffee shop.
Great question. We have, you'll notice on our funding sources, we've got the COG / Broadmoor for not only to go and talk with them more about dollars and in-kind support, which would include that. I am somewhat optimistic that they would participate, but we've not had the discussion.
I just remember before the online ticketing, sometimes in the days in the chamber where it felt like we worked for the COG. And I'm just saying that if they would put some COG personnel in some concept like the second concept, would only be to their benefit and could help us.
So they could be our private partner.
Well, I think that it's all a common thread of things coming from the mobility study, and they point to Hiawatha Gardens being a transportation hub and the preservation of the building for multiple uses. Obviously, the library is possibly on the table, you know, further chamber and event center for city council and other organizations that they would be in kind with that. That's for sure. I think they would be in concert with that. I mean, for them, you know, an extra 30 or 40K is not too much.
Any other questions on this topic? Yeah.
Doug, I was holding some interest in the water tower. How bad, what kind of condition is the tank in?
So the water tower was made out of an old boiler, and those old boilerplate and those old materials, long time.
They were
What's the
still,
last?
they were still using it up there,
Okay.
Yeah, they were
just
still.
to hold water.
Because I also see it as, and I used to work for the railroad for some, and so I like this kind of stuff, and I think there's a future for that water tank, and I don't know if it needs to be with these guys, or if it could be just part of, through the town, maybe in the URA or something.
Sure.
Because I was thinking, the weather's getting hotter, you may have noticed, and, Uncle Wilbur is very popular, water features, and
Right.
why couldn't we have like a walk under it,
Do a
get
little
some
pocket park
water,
somewhere. and-
Soda Springs
Sure.
Park goes right into the creek, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or, God forbid, we redo the garden up there with a different pattern
Sure.
and, use it up there, but I'd like to see something happen with it too, 'cause I think
Yeah,
it's
it's just
equally
metal,
valuable.
it was never, there was no toxic substances related to that particular water tank, so.
And Becky, we had proposed something for that previously, we took it out of this particular presentation because we aren't time limited, but I think you're spot on, that there's some great uses that we've come up with for that.
So what's the?
I don't think we know what else is there, what other kind of things, is there a listing of the
Yes.
other stuff, just 'cause I
will
would
send that
love
out,
to see
I will
that.
send out the list.
Alright, thanks.
How approximate is this for Steve, cause he spent like twice this on the pavilion?
Oh, you mean in terms of additional fundraising that you could do outside of?
Or how much it would really cost, basically, it seems much more extensive than the pavilion, and we spent twice as much.
Well, I think, he had to go get a lot of stock metals for that. Everything here is 90% there outside of probably tiles and whatnot. I think he acquires most of that secondhand or free. What I see the cost of this would be moving it and the ballast and having it graded. Besides that, putting the rail together, whatnot like that is pretty.
We'd have to ask him for an itemized budget though.
Yeah,
I feel like
I
that's the point
think
where-
that would be more than reasonable.
I may have missed this part, but you're building a structure for this thing to be on.
So the mountain piece would kind of be concrete, I think, and then the mountain.
Yeah, no, I saw the picture, I just wanted.
Yeah, then the kind of blue mountain in the background is glass and mosaic, and then the Manitou Springs.
So the car itself, the cog engine itself would be resting on just rock, like, 2.5 inch.
Rock versus
rock.
rail?
Well, the engine would
Rail
rest on
and then-
rail and then ballast rock, it's
Yeah,
ballast,
okay.
that's what they call it, when you.
Seems like an awful lot more than 20,000, but I'll let somebody else figure that out. Alright,
It
any
was
other,
an initial estimate.
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Any other questions? So your time frame for getting back to us?
I would say quickly, since we have the 5th off, the 5th
Mhm.
Tuesday off, we can go whenever we can fit us on. If you we wanna look at the mid-year budget, right? We have to get on.
Well, you're gonna miss that. Well, that's gonna be next, we can decide that. That's gonna be on the 6th. For the
So
mid-year
that
budget.
that way we would have by Wednesday of next week.
Next week.
Yes,
Get an itemized budget and timeline?
Okay.
I would think so.
Yeah, I
You're
can price off
optimistic.
stuff, I can price off materials.
Okay, so if you'd like to do that,
Mhm.
then we can consider that on the
I
6th.
think it's a good idea. If we fail, you just take us off the agenda, right?
Okay, does that work for everybody?
Low.
That work? Put that on there?
I'm just looking to start building on the 7th.
There we go. I can come and shovel some.
Could I just ask, are
Tractor.
we on the right track, no pun
Yeah.
intended?
Yes, that's a good point. Is there additional communication?
I think for the initial one, it's probably about as good as it's gonna get
Right.
for the second option, that's much more problematic.
I would agree.
So I'd ask,
And I wouldn't put it up, I wouldn't put the second one up there. This first one's going behind StoreQuest in the first place.
I put the second one down in front of the chamber.
I like that. It doesn't fit?
I'd like to get a little more specificity on the location up there. I did just pull up the assessor map, and if someone could just figure out where it would go, that would be
Can we bring
helpful.
Michael next time?
Yeah, that'd be good. Alright, so, on the 6th of August, we would consider whatever budget requests you all have, and we would consider that as part of the mid-year budget review. If you can get us some information. Okay, anything else on this topic?
I think the group did a great job from initial concept and.
It was a weird meeting,
criteria,
right?
and boiled it down,
We all left really happy.
really good.
A lot of good ideas. A lot of good ideas.
I'm like,
Thank you
it
for
was just, it all just all kind of came together. We all said, hey, that was kind of fun. And I don't know what I
Thank
expected.
you for your efforts in trying to make this happen.
I got one more question.
Yeah.
Is this copy for anybody?
Yeah, feel free. Consider it.
Really good, guys. Warning.
Alright, we're gonna take a short, segment there.
Julie, it's been a minute, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Maybe we should get together and chat maybe.
I think we should.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Great, that's great.
Thanks.
But again, I don't know, that's the next.
Choo-choo, I love choo-choo.
The first part's that they did.
You want one? Hey, that's good stuff.
I was listening, I was listening.
Might have to stay and listen to more.
We have one that's supposed to roll it.
There you go. Surprisingly good. It's not usually my favorite, but it's, yeah. Totally favorite. Where did you get that from? The bar was low, but still, it's pretty good.
Really good. This is good. This is like the best town ever. But it's got nice fruit flavors. Usually they get saltwater taffy and it's like, it's just.
Well, do you know, like, so right now, you know,
Do goes one way,
do goes one way, right? So
they should. So this is gonna create a roundabout. Taxi.
all day long, you know, and so holy crap. They were like, they were saying it's a long way. Well,
That's not it. It is, but it just pull it up a slide. Oh, no, you had another one, coming down, over the top. I can use this, but how do I, oh, here. Oh, no, that's not it, okay. Thank you. Come on, this little figure, right there. Is he going sideways? I had to take it down. You think it's in the PowerPoint? Yeah, try the chart. Oh, there it is. Okay, so now can I advance? I should be able to just.
Farley?
Click.
At this point,
Maybe I'll click over here.
Yeah,
I'll just click over there, I don't know, this should work.
Okay, I get ready to care of this.
Okay, so now let me see if I can, okay.
Went to the trading post. What the keyboard
And they
I think I'm good. Forward back. This is not my good time of night. We're now considering a morning workshop. We have the city council. Some people are just getting started, you know, I'm like, oh my God. Yeah.
And we go to midnight, so we have to try to watch.
Yeah, going to midnight was very difficult.
But we do it at 10 o'clock. 10 is the last meeting that works like 11 hours. It fits a lot of money.
And how long earlier is our fun?
Yeah, I'm coming back for that. And I have a card for, and I have a card for, Donna.
Oh, wow.
August 13th. That's what I think. I think that's what Roy told me, end of August.
heard that.
I don't know exactly where they are on.
So I didn't get to talk to you guys the other night, just realized you were there, and then I just flew by.
Ice cream store in
Gary?
Okay, Sasha John.
No, not Josh and John, they just serve Josh and John.
I know.
Let's go ahead and come back to order, please.
Next to the
There's been a suggestion that we could finish up our agenda items in the next 15 minutes. I'm not sure about that.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
okay, all right.
Yeah, we want to.
All right.
See ya.
Alright, we do have 45 minutes allocated for this particular item. Hopefully we can get through that. Thank you for joining us. I want to just do a quick introduction. I think everybody knows you all, but just for the record, if you could just let's make sure those are still on.
Green light.
Green light?
Yep.
Green light?
Do you have to talk? I mean,
You have to
push this
talk.
button? No, do you have to push the button to talk?
Nope.
If it's green, it's good.
Okay.
You're good.
I'm Laura Neiman, I'm the project manager on the Hiawatha Gardens project as well as the mobility study. And Susan and Tweed are our consultants that help us with community engagement in a big strategic way that we wanna talk to you about tonight, about how the public has weighed in on this particular project in the past several months. And you mentioned having already read the packet, so I'll just jump right to the fact that what we'd like for you to do tonight is make a decision about retaining the building based on the information we're gonna share with you. And so if need be, you can go and you can look over the history. I put some dates down here. I think most of you know those dates. But we agreed the last time we were together, just a few weeks ago, that moving forward with the abatement, which we needed to do regardless of whether we were keeping the building or tearing it down, so thank you for that. As well as we're getting some demo plan, pricing together, appreciate that as well. But tonight is specifically about, are you prepared to make the decision on retaining the historically relevant portions of the building? And there's a diagram within, if you need to know what those historically relevant pieces are, you can refer to that. And also a reminder, if I may, that on page 5, last August, you adopted some givens as it relates to this particular property. And you can certainly read through those, but number 1 is until the transformation is complete, which we agreed we were going to table about what to do specifically with that building until the mobility study is complete in the beginning of 2020, probably February of 2020. The city will continue to maintain the building and the site. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Susan and Tweed to remind us of what we did in the community engagement process and how our citizens weighed in along the way.
Thank you. I'll take the lead, but Tweed is here as a resource as well. So, we set some goals before this
process began. It's a 6-step process. And we wanted to first provide people factual information in the community so that they could develop some judgment about the building and the site. We also wanted to make sure we gave ample opportunity for people in the community to tell us what their ideas were, what they were excited about, any concerns they had about both the site and the building. And then ultimately to develop a community plan based on the facts, based on community preferences, and also based on, as Laura said, the resulting mobility study. So there's a lot of information that has to converge before a decision can be made on a plan for the site and or the building. Important to note though, we in our community discussions, we have made the point that this is, if the building goes forward, whatever happens on the site is gonna need to be a community-based solution. It can't just be City Hall's gonna pay for it. So we've talked about that, both funding, operations, maintenance, the whole thing. So just to make sure we're all on the same page with that. Our first step in the community engagement process was to have a September 20th community open house. We had about 65 to 70 people there, and we focused on the site, not the building specifically at this first step, but the site, which of course includes the building. We gave them the information we had so far about the building, with the caveat that we didn't have complete information. We knew more information was needed. We were just asking for initial thoughts, initial concerns, initial ideas. So we asked, after giving people information, answering questions, we asked people to individually post on the wall what excited them about these possibilities with the site or the building, and what they were worried about, what concerns they had. People told us they were excited about potential community uses, and all kinds of different uses were suggested, some really creative, cool stuff. They were excited about helping solve traffic and parking issues, about the ability to have a really innovative and creative design for the building and or the site. The historic character of the site was important to people. Some people were excited about removing the building. So you can see there were 5 things, and those are in descending order of mention. Most people, the most excitement was for potential community uses, and then it went down from there. People were concerned about the design of the look and feel of the building or the site. They were concerned, some were concerned about too much parking, others were concerned about cost, concerns about, let's make sure we get the right community use on that site, some concerns about safety, and also not enough parking. So we took all of that, we went back to the community for the second step, and this step really focused specifically on the building itself. So we had a November 15th community workshop. We had about 25 participants there. And the purpose of that meeting was to get response to a list of 14 community uses, or 14 potential uses for the site that had been suggested by the community over, in some cases, years. But the city gave us everything they had about, people have said, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? So we put a list of uses, 14 uses. Some required retaining the building, some required removing the building. So there were both kinds of options for the site. And then we had small groups go over that list, discuss that list, and rate those potential uses according to their level of support. The use that got the highest, it was a 0 to 10 rating, 0 meaning absolutely no support for this use, 10 meaning full support, love it. The most highly rated uses from the workshop, the first was retain the existing building for use as an intergenerational community activity, event, and meeting center in addition to Memorial Park. That received an 8.25 rating out of a 10-point scale, so pretty high. Second one was retain the building and develop public-private partnerships to create uses for it, like co-working spaces or a grocery store, something like that. That received a rating of an 8.0. So those were the top, most highly rated. All of the top 4 that you see there, ranging from an 8.25 down to a 5 point, all focused on retaining the building. Then we decided we needed to get a broader community perspective on potential building uses. So we conducted an online survey. We had about 100, or we had exactly 123 people respond to that. Again, we gave them the same list of uses, potential uses that people in the workshop reviewed, except we added one use that was suggested by a workshop group. So there were 15 potential uses on this survey that people could respond to, and we asked them to indicate their first through 4th most preferred uses. The top first choice use from the survey that was rated first choice by 24% of the survey respondents was actually one that was suggested by one of the workshop groups. And I'll read it, it's long, but I'll read it to you. Retain the existing building for use as an intergenerational community/event and meeting center, replacing the Memorial Hall to make room for other city offices. Convert the remaining site to a multimodal transportation hub with a multi-level parking structure with a rooftop garden. So lots of stuff. The second most chosen use was retain the existing building for use as an intergenerational community activity event and meeting center in addition to the Memorial Hall. That was the one that was most highly rated in the workshop, you'll recall. And then the third, also 15%, was remove the existing building and convert the entire site to parking uses with a combination of parking garage and surface parking. So, when it comes to sort of gauging what does the community want when it comes to keeping the building or not keeping the building, we went back and looked at the survey responses, and of the first through 4th choices that people chose, 350 of those choices were for retaining the building option. Am I making sense? You had 4 choices and okay. 127 of those first to 4th choices were remove the building options. So it's almost 3-to-1 interest in retaining the building versus removing the building. Certainly, I don't want to misrepresent. There were some people at the workshop who felt strongly the building should go, but when you look at the numbers from everything, on the survey at least, it's the other way. So what the community has told us so far, when you look at the open house, the workshop, and the survey responses, there's significantly more community support for keeping the building than removing it. And the primary reasons cited for that are people are interested in some kind of community use or a combination of a community use and a transportation use. It's really too soon to draw conclusions about which community uses for the building are most preferred. That's going to take a lot more discussion if the building's retained once we have information from the mobility study and more factual information. It's going to, as I said, it's going to require more processing. Just want to point out the primary reason for advocating to remove the building is certainly the need for additional parking. So that's what we've heard so far. We're happy to answer any questions that you have.
And I'd like just to add that I'm grateful for the professional expertise of both Susan and Tweed, who volunteer their time so graciously to our community. So thank you. They kept us on track in a big way.
Next steps, we'll continue to talk to the community, but we're kind of on hold because of the mobility study. That's such an important element that could have huge impacts on the site. We don't want to move forward until we have all of that information. Laura obviously can tell you more about the timing on that, but once we have that, once Laura and her team have analyzed it, then we can go back to the community and once you've decided if the building's gonna stay, then we can gear up again and make some decisions.
So the decision about the building, hold on a second. Yeah. Okay, so the decision about the building staying or not, are you leaving, and I think that's why we're here, that is independent of the mobility study now, that we could make that decision, and perhaps that could inform the mobility study. If we say the building's staying, you work around it. If we say the building's going, you plan accordingly.
And you don't have to, I mean, it's certainly up to council, but you don't have to determine the use.
I understand.
To
But
determine if it stays or goes, yeah.
What I'm trying to get at is it sounds like this decision could help inform some of the decisions of the mobility study. As opposed to needing to wait for that decision about the mobility study, because they're gonna probably wanna know, well, are you keeping the building or not? And then they can kind of lay out traffic, transportation, whatever it is.
If we had that decision about the building, it would make everything flow a little easier.
That's what I thought, okay, all right. Council?
Can we decide that tonight?
Well, we can certainly have some discussion, we probably can't take any formal action on it,
Okay.
but we can have the discussion and see if council is leaning towards keeping the building, then we'll figure out how to formalize that decision at the next meeting.
Yes, to piggyback on the discussion earlier tonight, add another penny to the sales tax, put the 200K toward Hiawatha and our library.
I'm sorry, 200K, I missed the last part.
200K toward Hiawatha and make it the library.
Oh, and make it the library, and that's the last part.
It'd be bigger. You can just use it in the lower section.
So does that mean for purpose of this discussion, you would support keeping the building? I was trying to, you didn't say that.
Yeah. If I could have that, I'd say keep the building, because it makes financial sense at that point.
If you don't have that confirmation of its use, are you still able to wanting to weigh in on save the building or not? Without the confirmation, it will be used X.
I think that the general community has weighed in and they want the building. As much as I personally might like to see it go away, that I think it's pretty obvious that they want it. They have no idea how to pay for a minimum $3 million project. They don't know when they might ever do a $3 million project and continue to put money into maintaining this thing for no good reason, but there you go. That's why I think without a plan sooner than later, and to piggyback on this sales tax increase, because it's gonna take more money at the end of the day. They want 2.6 for the library expansion at the Carnegie building, it's gonna be, 3.6. And it actually be a much bigger building, it'd solve all the parking issues, it'd solve all the community, neighborhood issues. And it would be even, besides that lower part of the building being bigger than the expansion would be, there's some things that you wouldn't need in that building because it'd be in a common area like bathrooms, would be in a more common area outside of that library piece because you'd need different time access for that. And so you wouldn't need that, and you wouldn't need elevator. And so you actually get quite a bit more room by going over there for not, generally speaking, not a lot more money. And it's a building that needs a lot of love.
Okay, so I heard with an emphasis on figure out what to do with it, the figuring out meaning the library, save the building.
I think the community's spoken on it.
Okay.
Keep the building.
Okay.
The community has spoken on keep the building. I agree with Councilman Moore's assessment of that, and also, I don't know about the floodplain, which is something that Councilman Todd has brought up, which perhaps you can speak to. But the thing about putting the library there is that PPLD will help us with the interior of the library, because that's what we contract with them to do. So if we were able to create the building, it's my understanding that PPLD will help us with all the accoutrements of the library, which might be a faster path to getting that building going, cause even in a more robust economy, no one's stepping forward to say, here's my private money for your public-private partnership. We're just not seeing it, and it hurts, it pains me to see us spend money on this building. I mean, because there's so many needs that this town has nothing to do with my love or hate of the building. It's just, as long as we don't have a plan for this building, it's gonna keep costing us money that we could use somewhere else.
Okay.
Well, I have to agree with, the community said, 325 people said that we wanna keep the building. So how many people, if you got the whole community out here and said we wanna keep this, but if we were being good leaders and managing our budget the way we should be managing it, and it was my personal building, it would be gone, because I couldn't financially keep it solvent, I couldn't make it work. So, if you were to do something like Jay said, or, they were talking about the library, maybe that could be an option, but we just can't, this has been sitting there for 6-7 years now, and we keep having the same, with different councils, but we keep having the same question come up, what are we gonna do with it? You've done a great job in moving us ahead, but financially, I'll be one of the ones who would sit here and go, financially, we can't afford it. We cannot afford it. And I know that I'm probably not be the popular guy here, but with me, I would say, it's time's come, I'm sorry, but it has to go.
My one sense would be, without having a capital plan and a financial sustainability plan, we're just kicking the can down the road, and we just need to stop doing that and get on with this plan. I said earlier this evening, the fire department thing raised that in, red alarm levels. The voters were 80%. Why are you thinking about $4 million when you don't have a prioritized list of the capital plan, and you don't have a projection of where we're going with property taxes and sales taxes? I've experienced a retail store a week ago, exchanging a product, and they went through the whole thing. They said, oh yeah, you get a credit of 26 cents on your sales tax. I said, really? That's great. And then they went through the whole machinations and said, oh, this is really unusual. You don't get a credit for this. And then we finally figured it out, which was, man, to have this high sales tax. And I had to pay that because of the exchange. So I don't know where we're leaving our businesses with our sales tax at this point. Don't know where we're leaving our property taxes. I don't know what our demand is for capital. And we certainly aren't salting away significant money with our reserves. In fact, we took money out of the URA to get by some narrow gates, and this wasn't even an economic downturn for us. So it's really hard for me to say something. I think the library concept, it's in the floodplain. I can't imagine the library being in the middle of a bus depot with lots of traffic. It's not the place where you want kids coming after school to fend their way through the traffic. It's not where you want senior citizens to be going. It doesn't strike me as being an inviting place if you're gonna have all this transportation hub surrounding it.
Exactly why you would have something there.
Say again?
That's exactly why you would have something there.
Yeah, I just don't know about a library.
Independent of the use,
Yeah.
and given what you've just said, did that lead you to a conclusion about whether you would or would not suggest saving the building or tearing it down?
I'd rather spend the money getting, mothball as much as we can, spend the money on getting some expertise on a capital plan to get it done.
So, does that mean mothball, meaning save the building and not tear it down?
Correct.
Okay. So retain the building.
Yeah.
Final decision.
Minimum cost at this point.
Retain the building.
I would also retain the building. So,
I'm on an island.
You are.
I don't know about an island, but you're the only one on that line. Okay, so, the question is, should we do something formally because we don't make decisions in work session, but presumably we want to make this as a formal decision. And so my suggestion is let's put this on the 6th, and let's. It's not on the agenda. I think I prefer to put it on the agenda. So let's have a quick, either a quick resolution that we would adopt, or it would be by a motion, but we'll figure that out. A mechanism. Anybody have a preference? It's either by motion or resolution, I think would be a motion is obviously easiest. A resolution might give some history or some background to the community of why we made this decision. The question is how we need to put the resolution together, and it would be a series of whereases kind of going through what you described, and then therefore.
We've got all the facts that they put together, they would be relatively to put a resolution together.
Would be. Somebody wanna jump on that? Help Roy?
I'm sure.
Somebody?
I will work with Roy and Alicia and put together a resolution, happy to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I was gonna offer to help you, but,
It's okay.
but you jumped on board and
Okay.
said you'd do
I
it.
think
Yeah.
between the two, I think a resolution spelling that out, I think would be helpful for the record. So, I think that would be good. Okay, August 6th, we were gonna have such a short meeting on August 6th.
so much for that.
But we're not
But
gonna
this
need
should go
a,
fast.
yeah, we're not gonna need a presentation or
Right.
anything, we've had the discussion,
Yeah.
obviously people can weigh in as they'd like, but, okay. Anything else on that topic?
Great job.
So they're going to say how much money we're gonna spend on keeping this thing?
I don't think so.
I like
I hadn't
that.
heard that discussion.
Bob said minimal, I like whatever you said, minimal maintenance or.
I think
We
the
already have
given
the givens.
is, yeah.
It doesn't have a threshold.
Maintain it.
Maintain it, yeah.
Right, so, I'm not sure we have any money necessarily, but we would have volunteers to fix up the landscaping on the building, that's probably gonna stay no matter what. But it would seem to me that keeping this building looking nice, so that it's not an eyesore, would be helpful, and to spend as little money as we could to make that happen. I don't know what you all think about that. I think it's an eyesore at the moment, and we could easily fix that without too much money and without impacting anything else.
We proposed some landscape as well as some additional lighting from a safety concern. And council did not support any expense associated with that at the time. This was in March of this year. However, we can revisit that, I suppose.
I recommend that the work group, Hiawatha Garden work group put together, because it was very rough expenses. I think the landscaping was like $25,000, which was, in retrospect, ridiculous.
So maybe we could have that discussion, that there is money available through PBRTA for that project, and only for that project. So it would be good to maybe look at that, yes.
You know, it's easy to plant plants, it's not easy to keep them alive. So who's gonna do that? City gardener is gonna add to her load. And, I mean, you see the pots sitting out front, cause they can't figure out how to fix that, even though they've had solutions they're not going for. So I would be reluctant to just say, yeah, we're gonna plant some stuff and then just watch them die.
And I didn't necessarily say plant some stuff, it could be cleaning up what's there, it could be taking out some of the old junipers, but I think that was yet to be determined. And the plan to maintain it would obviously need to be determined as well. I'm just looking at getting it looking better than it is now. So I think the question is, can we create a plan and use the funding we have to make this building look presentable in the short term?
And I have to say that I really hate using the funding we have just to maintain the building that we're gonna keep boarded up to make it look good. That bothers me.
Well,
And we should be doing something that's going to either move ahead, you tear it down, you move ahead, you do something, but now we're just gonna do something, and 10 years from now, we're gonna have the same thing sitting down there, and we've expended all the money that we had on the table to do something with.
Then it
So, I'm just saying, that's my whole concern with this, because this is, we're going nowhere.
If that's the case, I'd at least like to have a building that doesn't look horrible for 10 years versus a building that looks pretty bad and a property that looks pretty bad for 10 years. I'd at least like it to look better. And it wouldn't be lost because you're not doing anything that is going away. In other words, if you put some landscaping, that's gonna stay.
We're
Put some lighting, that's gonna
fixing
stay.
outside of
Yeah,
that is all we're doing.
yeah,
I mean, that's it.
yeah, so it looks.
Structurally, this thing's
Not
gonna fall
touchable.
down around itself. So, I'm just
So-
throwing it out there.
Is
Yes.
council open to looking at a plan, figuring out what that budget would look like, prioritizing that, and then deciding yes or no?
Our work group will put something together for you.
Now, real quick,
What about the Boy Scouts? I mean, there's a lot of community projects.
how we're gonna get it done is another question.
Well, I'm just saying,
I
in your
understand.
plan, I mean, there's Boy Scouts that we have a community cleanup. All these people that wanted to save the building, I bet between the Boy Scouts, there's groups that would probably volunteer to help, so you wouldn't have to.
Sure,
much in the
good,
budget.
good suggestion. Anything else from council?
If I recall right, what brought this question up was whether or not we were gonna take off the non-historic sections of the building.
Yes.
That's what precipitated this discussion in the first instance, cause I think that was the question you put to council a month ago maybe. And so we haven't really answered that question, but this would seem to fall in this very gray area of, if you spend that money, is the building gonna look any better? Or are we gonna then be into trying to figure out what to do with what we've uncovered by stripping stuff off? So I think that's a particular decision we would need input on.
Right now, city staff, Kim is putting together a demo plan. Approval was given, I think it was a $7,000 figure, to put a demo plan together that then will have the cost of demolition, which I think will be fairly significant for council to consider. And at that time.
Partial demolition.
Yes, we don't
Okay,
know
well, that
that,
term,
and
yeah.
so we will come back and present that information when we have that.
So maybe a comprehensive, okay, if we're gonna look at a demo, how we're gonna look at getting the building not sustainable, but at least, cause when those things come off, something has to happen with
To
what
the
stays.
outside, right.
Yeah, so maybe that's part and parcel of
It
it.
is.
If we do this, here's what we will do with the remaining portion of it to make it secure, et cetera.
And if I might make one other suggestion, when we mentioned that no one is willing, or no one has come forward from a public-private partnership standpoint, I don't know that we have done the best job in communicate that that could be an option in the community. So if there is, the decision by council with the adoption of the resolution on August 6th, if there could be some sort of press release that the council has voted to retain the historically relevant portions of this building, and we're seeking, you help me with this, but seeking community input of those who might be interested. I think we haven't probed the bushes enough to know that, and maybe something would happen as a result. The right way to do that, I'm not quite sure, but I know the need to do that, I think we should.
I would say seeking private-public partnerships to be able to consider potential uses for the building, is I think what you're saying.
Yes.
Well, it's kind of chicken and egg too. Do you define uses first and then define the partnerships to get those uses, or do you identify the partnerships first and then we'll work all that out.
Okay. Anything else?
So, on that vein, I mean, is it not the right path to ask PPLD what their take is on that, or is that out of step, or
I was thinking the same thing.
like, why wouldn't we go to PPLD and say, what do you think about this?
Natalie has the answer for that.
I do. I talked to John and they said they'd go wherever the city wanted it to go.
Okay.
So I just,
Good
yeah,
answer.
so I don't,
From a process perspective, we've got some concern, I would have some concerns, please chime in here, but the assumption would be, if you're talking library, the city's already decided the library's gonna go there. So why should we, well, I know that wouldn't be true, but people jump to that.
That's right.
So I think we need to keep clean slate as long as we can, our people won't participate. They'll say, well, you've already decided library's going there, why should I help you come up with a plan? And then you don't have as strong a plan then.
I think the question was the feasibility of it. So you have to find out so that you can have an informed judgment about whether it's even
even an option.
feasible.
Yeah.
I think that's what I'm hearing.
Oh, okay.
Is
If
to
it's just,
explore-
is this even possible?
Right,
Yes
that's
or
all
no,
I
and
was
then-
asking.
That's what I
Okay.
I mean, will they be on the Councilman Moore side or the, Councilman Todd side and go, we would never put it where the buses are, or we would put it exactly there? I mean, those would be, like, it's just asking the question, if we said this is where if we were to say that, would you go, no, that's not possible? I mean, you should have asked us first before you said that.
Yeah, so if it's just feasibility,
It's
I
just
think that's okay.
questions, it's
Okay.
not,
Okay.
we have these two needs. I think this council is really trying to decide if they're compatible. They may or may not be.
And what would the next step be in that regard? Could Natalie and I work on that just to know whether that could even be an option, just to know the feasibility? Okay.
I think it's been raised. and
Okay.
I think having
And
that,
it's been raised by people in the community as well. So
one piece of information,
Yeah.
if they say great, tuck it away. If they say no, we
Yeah.
know.
Okay.
Okay? Anything else on this topic? Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll be back on August 6th with the resolution.
Yes.
The resolution will be due the Wednesday before, so,
I'm working with Alicia on something else this Thursday at 3:30, so maybe we can knock that out at the same time.
we will.
Okay.
Great. We're going to, at the request of the Mormons, we're going to, postpone item 4, discussion regarding Charles Rocky Memorial to August 6th. And, we'll move on to item 5, review of charter requirements for city administrator to live and manage Springs. I think this came up, and obviously it does come up. It comes up in the context of a permanent city administrator, not necessarily an interim. So the question is, do we want to deal with this tonight and potentially put something on the ballot issue, or do we want to postpone that decision, for some time down the road? If we're going to put it on the ballot, we probably need to start thinking about it. So that's the question.
I don't agree with it going about, I don't agree with it, I think it needs to stay the way it is.
Okay.
That's my personal opinion, so.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
My preference is that it stays the same, but I recognize that it has become in this market a burden. So I could be open to looking at something within like 5 miles of Manitou. I don't know, I don't have exact distances, but I could be open to a slight expansion of the residency, requirement.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in?
I would not change the charter for this. I feel pretty strongly that the city administrator, should be a resident. I would say that I might be open depending on the economy and the job pool at the time, that council would have the latitude to do things like housing allowances, which we haven't talked about. But again, economies don't go this way all the time, so we might find that in 10 years, we had more candidates and hopefully it's not true, but housing prices are lower. I mean, all of this can happen, but I don't like the idea of changing the charter. I don't like the idea of them not living here. I would, based on the type of job market situation that we're in right now, having councils be able to, which I think they have the latitude to do this, give some incentives to get the right people here, whatever those may need to be. But I'm not for changing the charter.
I don't necessarily think giving an allowance makes a place available. I mean, there's places that are just so astronomically expensive now, and so more money might not solve it. I really think that the city administrator benefits from living in town. We benefit from them living in town. I feel that way about the whole staff. So I'm wondering if there's a way of just putting a little grace in here to, it's like within a certain time period. This is says during the tenure.
That could be,
It
could be
says
interpreted
his
anytime.
his tenure.
The entire charter says his.
Oh, that's terrible.
Throughout.
But anyway, the tenure, so that could be the last day. Hey, I finally bought my house. So I mean, can we just like leave this like it is? Cause it just says, need not be a resident of the city, but during his tenure, he shall reside in this, oh, wait a minute, I didn't read the whole thing. So, maybe what we need is we need our own house. Maybe let's put them up at Carnegie. Put the library over here, city administrator over there. I'm just saying, I think it's not realistic. And we've had this problem for what, 18 months now? We've been looking for people and we've had difficulty with them finding a place or finding a place that's acceptable to them. So I think we need to loosen this somehow, so that we can get the right person in. They maybe have a year and a half to find that right place. Cause
So you'd leave the requirement, this gives them as long as they want, as long as council agrees to it.
Well, it says during his tenure, they shall reside in the city.
Doesn't say when. Council.
No, it doesn't, but it says during the tenure, I don't think his tenure, during the tenure, they shall reside in the city. So that, to me, seems like they're here.
We have been told that we can interpret that loosely.
Okay.
Or we can interpret that
I'm all
strictly.
for that then. I'm all for the
The council
loose
can interpret that.
interpretation and just, in a communication way of like, we'd really like you to live here. Keep looking for a place. And really, when people are looking for a place to live here, they rarely go anywhere else other than driving around, in my opinion, like just to see what's up, because nothing ever lasts very long. I mean, those of you who have apartments, they're like, bing, they're gone.
So you'd keep the language as is.
Let's make it loose, yeah, just tell them, loose. You said we can interpret this as loosely as we'd like.
Are you suggesting we have a valid issue to change the language?
No, let's keep this and apply it loosely.
Okay.
I'm sorry if that wasn't clear. I keep trying to be clear.
I got it. Now I understand.
Can I make another comment? And that is, if you want a job at the salary we're paying the city administrator, there's virtually no housing stock here that's outside of that salary range. And coming from
outside, you don't mean that.
I totally mean that.
No,
Coming from a career where you had to move every 3 years, and it didn't matter if you lost all kinds of money on your house or had to pay, and no one I know was paid this much money to. So I have a little sympathy for people who can't find housing based on what we're paying them.
Well, I'm just saying, the
But I'm
availability
biased.
in the city is becoming almost nil. Truly.
So, leave the charter as is. Bob?
Number one, leave it as is. Number two, Jeff is very clear that the shall in there gives lots of flexibility. It's a statement of intent. So we have to do some very tricky thinking around that. Third point is we have a candidate from Aspen for city administrator, and I checked into, how does it work out there? Well, Aspen is definitely a totally different place. And so there they have workforce housing, and they gave that particular city administrator the right to buy a home within that confine, but then when that city administrator leaves, he's gotta sell his home, he can't hold on to it. But he got to buy it, and he got to get the appreciation of it, but it was an adjusted market, which is the same as providing a stipend essentially. But I agree with Nancy, we're nowhere close to that $150,000 salary for somebody who's gonna be, fairly long in their career. We've got plenty of housing options. They may not be the ideal one the candidate wants, because we have limited supply, but we certainly are not unaffordable. That would be my take on it.
So, Bob, leave the charter as is. All right. Well, I want to speak just to suggest, I realize I'm in the minority, but I would change the charter to not require it. I would probably give some further distance to that, and here's a couple reasons. I think that we've had a problem potentially with our city administrator position becoming politicized. And I think that having someone live here, requiring that, increases the possibility that it becomes a political position. We are the political body, we are required to live here. we make those political decisions. And so having a professional manager who is here to manage our city, which is basically what we're hiring, I don't think they have to live here. I'd like to see them within a close proximity so they can get here, but I don't think that, I think it hurts, frankly. I think that it makes it potentially a political position, and that's my concern. But I heard majority of people leave it alone, so. I didn't ask Jay. Thank you. But you're down here, Jay. It says Jay wants. No. Thank you.
Becky wouldn't let Jay talk.
That's not true.
All right. I've said my piece.
I'm leaving.
Thank you, Becky. Leave it as is. All right. We won't be dealing with that. That's easier said. Easier than one less thing we have to do. City Administrator report.
Okay, just a little update on projects. The Metro District IGA is completed, just so you know, so that's off. And we have
both IGAs? I don't think so.
You signed
one,
and then
there's a second.
But it's gonna be talking to Leah. It's just about done. So.
Okay, so there is the second
Yeah,
one.
there's a little second part, and she says she can knock that out.
Okay.
Real quick. So here's a update of all those priorities. So you kind of see where we're at with those. And I won't go over all those, but you can just look at them. If you have questions, let me know. We did hire a temp clerk, who's also learning some of the court business, so they can help with that. And we're advertising for a clerk position at this time. OpenGov will be ready for department budget numbers on August 14th. So the departments will start putting in their budget numbers at that time. Becca is waiting for Clifton and Larson on the budget education class as part of the public engagement process. So we'll let you know when that happens, and it's going to be in a setting like this for you to go over the process as well, but then the public can listen in on how the budget process goes. And then I did find out that the Colorado State Forest Service, we could get trees from them, like 30 trees for $75. And they're 5 inch to 12 inches tall, and they have different types of trees. They do have some limits this time of year. And actually we could get them in by the end of September or earlier. We were looking at a mid-October, possibly planting period. They also have information on that, so that's just, I want to let you know, I was looking at some of that for the environmental resolution and planting trees. Last week's to-do list, the Schreiber Island weeds, they are the gardener's responsibility, so right now Jeff Jones is getting with the gardener to get those cleaned up in that island. The Serpentine area shopping carts, the police did not find any shopping carts when they went out there, so they must have been moved. Transits must have moved those, but they haven't found any. Chapita Road, overgrown trees, grass, weeds, that's being addressed by Ally and the seasonals, so we're gonna get on that. And then Crystal Hills, Bowers Park potholes, they're hoping to have those filled by the end of the week. And so it is on their list to take care of that. The Serpentine Bridge issue, the crack is a little bigger, but it is private property. So right now we're talking to Jeff Parker on what can we do. If it's a safety issue, then we need to do something for public safety. And if it's not, then we have to talk to the owners, and that's that whole deal of trying to get that property something we can work on, but we just can't do it without their permission at this time. So we're working on that. I have talked to Shelley. We could do a scoping report, would cost $7,500 with our on-call engineers, and we do have the budget for that if there's interest in checking out that bridge and the interested parties in that bridge. So that's something we can look at. I did not give her permission to do that yet.
So, speaking of Serpentine,
yes.
We talked about, but I don't see it on our agenda, that we would have an executive session to talk about the potential purchase of that property.
TRS study, the
Right.
appraisal and recommendations.
Is that going on August 6th?
Yes.
Yes.
It's not on here.
Okay.
we're gonna have to look at August sixth.
We have a lot of August sixth things, so.
Apparently that is either done or
The appraisal's done,
appraisal's done, so we were gonna take a look at that.
and TRS should come to us with the recommendation, updated recommendation.
Yeah.
Fine.
Cause I have a question.
I'm almost finished, but you can ask your question.
Okay, first off, Forest Service trees, let's make sure they're not all conifers.
No, they have a whole list of trees.
I've seen some of their trees, yeah.
We can pick which ones we need, you know, and what we think is best for the area.
Okay, and the other thing, Roy, is this resolution started out with 11 items. Then I saw another one from Ken that had 14 items on it. Now it's got 17 items on it, and I have not seen that. And funny how I thought I was part of this. And so I would really, really like to get a copy of this, and also get a copy of it that I can print off on my own computer, or get a hard copy, so I know what the heck's been added and what's going on. Did you get my email about
You couldn't print it out, and I meant to
No,
bring.
and about tomorrow?
Yeah, I did. I meant to bring you a hard copy, but I apologize.
That's okay.
You want an emailed copy?
Yeah, please, and don't put any like bells and whistles on it, so I can forward it and get it printed off my desktop.
Should be able to do that.
I know, I mean, that last thing, it just wasn't having any of it.
Does
So I
anyone
don't-
else need that?
They don't
The
care.
changes came about because of the conversation we had. There were 3 or 4 items that came
It
up.
went from 11 to 14, that's what I saw.
So we'll bring that back, get you a copy.
All right,
Thank you for that, thank you.
you're welcome. And, the only other thing I have is, calendar of events is the, Open Space Advisory Committee are having site visits this week, 25th, 26th, and 27th at different locations. And that's all I have.
Okay, council correspondence, do you have anything? Yes, Gary.
Yes.
Sorry.
Sure, it's for Roy.
Yep.
Another task for Roy. Down at the El Colorado Lodge, they built a parking lot, and they paved the parking lot, and I don't see any storm drainage plan or anything on that, because now, with all the rains, it's washing out the parking lot, which is washing out the material that the parking lot was built with onto the new sidewalks. So, I don't know where that's, how that was approved, there's no, I mean, you can't just push everything out into.
Where is that at?
El Colorado Lodge.
And then right across the street, that was brought up to my attention, and I seen it today, there's Smoky Joe's, and there's another curio shop now, or whatever it is, and now they've backed a fifth wheel in there, and they're now selling, like, stuffed bears and elk heads and, yeah, all kinds of stuff out there, and it's like, is this all approved? It's kind of concerning.
Okay, I'll look into it.
No problem. I keep coming up stuff to you, buddy.
Anybody else have anything else for Roy? Yes.
I have one thing for Roy, where we got an email about the camping on open space, and there was a long email thread. Where are we with that? It came from Mike Mayo, and it had, responses that he had gotten regarding these areas, and responses that he had gotten from police officers. But there's some camps, they're not only trash, but there's, coal and propane, or, the stove, and I didn't know where we were with that.
I don't know, but
Okay.
I can find out.
Okay.
And then let you know, let everyone know where we're at, so, okay.
And I have a couple of parking updates. The financials are here. We are about 57% above last year already. That's not surprising because I don't remember when the Park Avenue Bridge opened, but it seemed to be July, and I've got data through June. But at any rate, town's also been very, very busy, and SP Plus is fully staffed right now. So you'll also notice if you look at these that the ticket revenue is also higher, not just because the amount of space that's being available, those 90 spaces being back in, but being fully staffed and very busy, you're going to see some increases in that. So those numbers are here if anybody wants to see them. There were 2 topics discussed today. They will be bringing forth a recommendation to us regarding how to solve the Banana Manor parking situation. They were going to try to get that on the August 6th agenda. I don't know if they managed to do that before tonight.
It is not on the agenda now.
Oh, well, so what
Don't think
they,
after tonight.
so that will be coming forward to council in a hopefully a not too distant, date. They are still doing, so we talked about better utilizing our inventory of parking downtown overnight, allowing a permit process for that. It's complex, planning is still working on it, it's gonna take a little while. But for all the people out there who are wondering what's happening with it, it's still being worked on. And that's about all I have, from that.
Okay. You do have something that I was supposed to remind you of, and it's your topic, but it's all of ours, to confirm that we're meeting with the school board on August 12th. You were aware of that? And the question is, we need to confirm that. That was the date we had selected. And so
I think I handed that off to Natalie.
well, she asked me.
I did ask him to remind us,
And
but
she
it's
asked me
5:30 right
whether-
now at the Silk Building, so
whether it was
that's
open.
not fit, let us know.
Right, so if folks can check to see whether that's still a good date, do we still want to do that, et cetera?
I think we wanna do it, so.
Already on my calendar.
Okay, anybody else, everybody else? Yes? You're good? You're good for that?
Yeah.
12, I'll be there.
August 12th, 5:30, Silk Building.
It's on my calendar, but I might have a meeting that night.
So, you just put it on your calendar, or you got an invite?
No.
We discussed it at the last meeting, dinner.
Right, there wasn't an invite sent, but it was discussed when we last got together.
Can you send us an invite?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, is everybody okay with keeping the date? That's the purpose.
Fine.
Good?
Yes.
Yes? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, Natalie, we're good.
Thank you,
And
Natalie.
I'll send an invite.
Thank you, Natalie.
It has to.
Actually, there is an invite. Somebody's, Alicia sent it out.
Oh, nice.
From 5:30 to 10:30, you're hosting.
We're gonna have to add some alcohol.
But not everybody from council seems to have gotten that.
I didn't get it.
No, I'm not sure who is on.
I'll just do it and I'll include, the school board too, so.
That'd be good. Okay, but for some reason, not everybody's on. Okay, let's see, where are we? Bob? Nothing.
I met with Tim Beeson from my ward the other day regarding the Crystal Park Road experiment. And, there is a group that has formed and done petitions, against, to basically stop any further progress with Crystal Park Road. So, I encourage them to please try to work with it and to further the experiment and, more to follow.
Can I ask about, when they paint those lines down in the lower part, are those basically gonna be just for bicycle traffic, mainly meant for?
No, the lines up Crystal Park Road,
Right.
no, that's just to, delineate the, how wide the lane is, so that it's a.
Just to delineate how, okay.
Yeah, there's no bicycle lanes on Crystal Park Road. There's some where it's, some parts of the road's wider, so you can kind of use it as a bike lane, but
But
it's
you
not
see that,
intended.
since that was happening, it's gotten worse just by the amount of cars, I don't know where the cars were.
There are more,
before that.
my sense is there are definitely more cars on Crystal Park Road.
There is.
I don't know why.
And then, they weren't there and they probably paint the lanes and all of a sudden we see all these influx of cars.
I don't, there might be, I think it's a coincidence. I can't imagine why that would cause more.
But now they're parking further down, they're getting outside
Yeah,
of us,
yeah,
so.
I don't know, I don't understand it.
Okay.
Unless they're building, there's like, as I understand it, like 100 platted lots up in Crystal Park. So unless they're building out some of, more of those, and that's creating more traffic on Crystal Park Road, I do not know the answer to that.
Or maybe they're parking at Uber and home.
All right, let's see, Gary, you're good, Bob, you were good, Nancy, that was yours. Okay.
Two little things.
I got an email, actually Susan did too, from a resident who I do not know, but she was talking about the Pawnee light down at the bottom of the hill by the library, not allowing the left turn light isn't coming on. She's been sitting through like 3 or 4 passes of the signals and not getting a turn signal, so she's waiting.
We're working on that.
Is that CDOT?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
We I've been connecting with some people, we're working on finding out what's the deal.
Okay, good. I just didn't wanna drop that. And then Bob confirmed this. It seems to me the floodgates on Canyon have been fixed. We went over that and you live up there. It was just like, boom. It wasn't like this clang.
It's clanking again.
It's clanking
It's
again.
not as loud as it was. I'd say it's about 70% as loud as it was, and a lot louder than it was when they first fixed it. It was quiet.
It was really quiet last time, which was Sunday morning that I went over that. And
Depends on your
darn, I
speed
thought they
too.
fixed it.
But it also could be if they're using those rubber pads that they stuck in there, the rubber pad that I saw wasn't attached. So it probably was fine for the day or two, and then it moved, and that was the end of that. Maybe they did other things, but there was a rubber pad stuck in between the 2 metal things, and it wasn't attached to anything, so it was.
You want me to look into that again?
Before
it's 20%?
I don't know how anybody sleeps at the courthouse. I really don't.
Or sit on their porch and have their little cocktail with the clank clank all the time.
It's really hideous, I know.
Yeah.
Well, here I thought it was fixed, so I'm sorry.
I think
It's
it
not
was for a
fixed.
day or so.
Did we use the floodgates the other day? No.
No, we haven't used, the only chance we had, there wasn't enough water to raise them.
Oh, gotcha.
So, we're still waiting.
Alright, was that 1 or 2 things?
That was it, no, that was it, those
That's
two.
it. Per council direction, I did meet with Natalie last week, but you heard her update on the first agenda item. I did not make my URA meeting, but I'm sure that Ann Nichols informed them of anything since she's been at every meeting I've been at here, probably more. And, well, Leslie, yes, I knew with her.
I had a question, Ann, are you planning to present to council a work plan for this year in terms of a budget request and a work plan?
We will present the budget whenever you'd like. We started working on it.
Cause I think we started a process last year, to present that and then incorporate that for council approval as part of the budget process, somewhere along the way.
So that you'd be aware, yes.
Well, we'd be aware and approve.
Well, you don't typically approve our budget.
You did last year?
You approve the sales tax either getting remitted to us or not.
That's what I mean. And that's what I mean by the budget, not necessarily how you spend it,
Yes.
but whether the sales tax is remitted, which is obviously gonna be dependent upon your plan.
Right. So
And
we would be ready probably within a month.
Okay. So whenever you have that, would be great.
A question, if you don't mind. You said there was a study, school's about to start on the Crystal Park Road traffic for the school stops for the kids. You know, where the bus stops, and there was some group that was getting together, to figure out, I guess, how many cars are going down there. And are they still doing that, and have they come up with a solution?
They have not come up with a solution. There's gonna be another meeting, a public meeting in September, I think. I don't know the exact
So the
date.
school's about to start, and that curve is still there, and the children are still walking across the street, and you still have to listen for traffic and run for your life. So I'm just curious.
My guess is there wouldn't be any changes before school starts.
Yeah, that's really, yeah.
I think-
Until somebody gets smacked or something, it's pretty scary around that corner. So, I was just curious if they realize how bad it is. Tell people, I guess I could hold a sign out there, I guess I could put that on my next hotel or something. Slow down.
And you know, they put that crosswalk right in the curve, which is really true, and maybe a person, you know, what do they call?
Crossing
A
guard.
crossing guard, thank you, maybe a crossing guard would be in order, cause it's a totally blind curve coming
It's the
this
sun.
way.
When people are coming around that curve and the little children have to cross, they can't see because
That's right, and the people are hauling.
We got a couple other issues we've gotta get. Roy's got something else.
I'm gonna pass out the, police department assessment. This is confidential because it involves, employees, but after, the hiring process is done with the police chief, then we will make sure it's available to public after we go through it and make sure they're protected in any way.
So presumably we will schedule a work session to have, an executive session to have a discussion about it.
Yes.
Okay. Not on August sixth.
No, okay.
We're gonna go ahead and adjourn our work session, and we will reconvene our special meeting. So, council, what's your pleasure in terms of, going back into an executive session? There perhaps are some additional issues we could talk about, that we didn't get done. What's your pleasure?
Can we, it would be that long, we would.
It can be as long or as short as we'd like to make it.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Let's get it done.
I'll grab those signs tomorrow.
Okay. So if we're going to do that, then we need to change the equipment here. We need to turn that off. If we're gonna go into an executive session, before we do that, let's make that decision. We recessed the executive session. We need to decide whether we're going to go back into that executive session, have a discussion, and then adjourn. That's what the decision I'm looking for.
I'm not sure that we have anything more until we hear back from Pam.
Okay?
And it is already emailed Pam, so I couldn't remember that we kept the option open, but I can't remember us being lingering on any discussion.
My sense is it's just Pam needs to go
Yeah, I'm
do
good.
her thing and then come back.
Well, we're not in executive session, we're in public session here.
Right.
Well, I'm just addressing executive, I don't know that I feel a need to go back into executive session until we have all the information. Until Pam is
Okay,
back.
that's the question I'm addressing. So you feel you've got enough done for tonight?
Yeah.
Wait for Pam to get back to us. The next executive session we could have will be August sixth.
We can have one next week.
No,
I don't think
we-
so.
Oh, we're not meeting next week.
Right.
I forgot.
So the
Did
question
you,
is whether
Larry,
there's.
did you have something though that you seem to wanna go into executive session?
Well, I'm just saying, we kind of talked about.
Hold on, we don't
Yeah.
talk specifics. We're broadcasting here.
Yeah,
so
we need to go into, I would like to go into executive
Okay.
session.
Okay.
Is that a motion?
We're going back to our
Make a
special
motion.
meeting, so.
Special.
We are in the special meeting.
Okay,
I-
because it's resumed.
Correct.
Sorry.
I'm looking, if we're going to go back into executive session, I would entertain a motion to do
I
that.
make a motion to go back to the executive session.
Is there a second?
Second.
So motion is second, any further discussion? If not, please raise your hand affirmatively. Raise your hand opposed, motion passes unanimously. Let's turn this stuff off,
How do we
and
turn
then we can have a quick discussion.